A girl named Cecile, with long, wavy, and blonde hair, with her eyes closed, stands in a lush white and pink dress in the middle of a dark room with a noose around her neck. Her hands are tied behind her back by a thick rope. This is a memory of a day when 3 men appeared in her path. The first man in the white wig and blue bolero suit coveted her body for his receivers. The second man, with deep blue eyes and a black suit contrasting with his brown hair color, was eager to get the girl's heart to fill the void inside him. The third man, dressed in a red tailcoat with white hair ending in a long, thin braid, dreamed of getting Cecile's soul to possess her completely. With the knife he was holding, he approaches the girl and slashes the rope tied around her neck. The people of this generation foretold hell for Cecile by pointing to her, for she is the villain in the story. They couldn't even speak ill of her because they were jealous, even though they didn't know the whole story. The man in the red tuxedo gave Cecile a hand so she could get up off the floor. Holding the girl, the blonde-haired demon's wings unfolded. It all started in one gilded palace, with white exterior walls decorated along with small sculptures. A paper with some important information falls out of the woman's hands onto the floor. Cecile asks her mother what happened and what the letter says. A woman in a blue dress and dark brown hair, turning her head away and covering her mouth with her hand, sadly asks what they should do now. With tears in her eyes, she turns to her daughter and explains to her that all their possessions have gone to Jacques and now they have nothing left. She falls to her knees. She covers her face with her hands and says that she doesn't understand how things turned out for them. Cecile sits next to her and tries to comfort her mother. Cecile realizes that her father abandoned them after all. She wonders if he would have done so if he had no son and if she were not a girl. The girl asks her mother, who is saddened by this situation, to pull herself together, as they must decide what to do before the rumors spread outside the house. She lifts her mother off her knees and holds her down. The woman asks Cecile what they need to decide, since they are in debt anyway and no one will help them. The girl suggests to her mother that she try to contact Andre, as he is a responsible man. He and her mother once had an affair. The woman does not really want to turn to her lover, but Kyle insists that they must turn to Andre, as a last resort will have to marry. An ordinary intermarriage is currently the most effective way of avoiding debt. But if I find out about Cecile's situation, the marriage will be meaningless to them. One evening, they decide to hold a reception for noble guests where they can find a marriage option. Cecile approaches one of the guests and tells him that the building is very stuffy and offers to go out for a while. The man politely refuses, saying that he has promised a dance to Lady Louise. He turns around and walks off in the other direction. Cecile finds this excuse country and his behavior too obvious. She turns around and notices how everyone around her, women and men, are whispering about something among themselves. Cecile realizes that they are discussing her and for some unknown reason laughing at her. Among the other people, she notices her uncle Jacques, dressed in an orange tailcoat and with a blue bow on his hair. He waves from afar to his sister, who sees him. Cecile wonders what he's doing here. One thought occurs to her, and calling her uncle a scoundrel, she comes to believe that the reason for the guests' mockery of her is that she has spread the rumor. Late at night, the palace garden is illuminated by a full moon. Jacques goes outside, followed by Sville. She decides to ask her uncle what he is doing here. Looking at him with her bright pink eyes, the girl suggests that Jacques has come to the reception to show off his newly acquired wealth. Her uncle confirms this, realizing that Cecile has already received a letter of transfer. Jacques jokingly tells his sister that he is sorry she found out from the letter, as he wanted to tell her in person when they met. Cecile reproaches her uncle for his behavior, which is very nasty. Grabbing his sister by the shoulders, he asks her why she thinks it's gross, and doesn't she want him to help her. Jacques reminds Cecile that girls can't make money, and so she has 2 options, either marry well or sell her body. The girl looks at her uncle with anger and disgust. Mentioning that rumor of their bankruptcy has already dissolved, the marriage option can be dismissed as it failed. Instead, Jacques offers his sister to give herself to him, as he can pay generously for her body, given his acquired fortune. Cecile responds by sending her uncle away with such an abominable offer. In case he does not leave her, the girl threatens to spread a rumor that he is an unscrupulous pervert who seduces his relative. Angry at this, Jacques lets go of his sister's shoulders and swings his arm in preparation to hit her, asking how dare she threaten him. But his attempt to hit the girl fails. He freezes in bewilderment and then passes out and falls flat on the tile. Suddenly, a voice behind Cecile's back says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The girl turns around and sees the demon behind her, hovering in the air on its big black wings. Cecile remembers the day she first met this man as a child walking in the alleys. She notices him holding the waist of a girl from whom he gradually takes her soul, and then falls dead on the tiles. The demon notices the frightened Cecile, and since she witnessed the girl's death, he hints to her that he should take her soul in that case, because witnesses do not just leave. Cecile at this time shakes with fear, clasping her hands together and closing her eyes, awaiting her turn to die in the hands of the demon. The man reassures young Cecile that he decides to wait a little longer and won't take her soul right away, and says that they will meet again when she is older. The girl finishes reminiscing about that meeting. The demon lands on the ground and, holding out his hand, introduces himself as Azrael and informs Cecile that he has come to help her. She asks Azrael what exactly he wants to say. The man tells her that he will do whatever she wants, but in return she will have to give up her soul. Stepping with his shoe on Jacques' face, he mentions that times are hard for Cecile, and types like her uncle will continue to appear around her. Cecile listens to the demon and thinks about what she should do since she needs to escape, but her body feels like it's frozen. But even if her body could move, would she be able to escape it? Somewhere in the distance, the voice of Cecile's mother is heard, looking for her and hoping for an answer, shouting out a question about where she is. The girl calls loudly to her mother to go to her voice. At this time, the demon Azrael puts his hand on the girl's shoulder and comes close to her ear and suggests that she think carefully about his proposal and that he will wait patiently for an answer, and gets off, leaving only a pair of black feathers behind him. Cecile is approached by her mother holding up the skirt of her delicate orange dress and asking her daughter if she has been in the garden the whole time. She then looks at a body lying nearby and asks Cecile who is lying there. The girl replies that it is only a drunkard and that it is not worth paying attention to him. The woman, distracted by the body, grabs her daughter's hands and fully informs her that she has good news. Cecile asks what the news is. Her mother tells her that the Duke of Marmontel has invited them to his ball and that he wants to meet Cecile. The girl remembers the days when her mother's new lover, a man named André with black hair and a long ponytail, lived with them. Even though Cecile had a real father, her mother was in a relationship with someone else. André says with a smile to the girl that he knows she's his hater, but they'll have to see each other often, so he asks her to try to smile. Tilting her head to the side, Cecile asks him with a note of sarcasm if he wants her to call her daddy. The smile is gone from the man's face. He frowns, asking the girl to stop acting like this. Cecile calls André daddy in spite of him. The man clutches his head in irritation and asks her to stop it again, as he is not going to make her his daughter. Cecile used to think that he didn't take her mother seriously, so she didn't like him. The woman walks up to André and puts her hand on his chest, thanking him for honoring her request. The man replies that he is always at her service. Afterwards, they clung to each other in a tight embrace. Cecile is annoyed by this, and with a scowl on her face, she turns away from them so as not to show her mother her fierce displeasure. She cannot understand her mother's immorality, but now everything has changed. Seated on the sofa, Ander tells the woman that he knows the Duke of Marmontel well. Cecile's mother questions him about whether this is true. Her lover confirms it and adds that in this kingdom, she can't find someone who knows about all the rumors faster than him. Sitting in a separate chair, Cecile grudgingly replies to him that it's just an amazing skill. André asks her if she is being sarcastic, and then laying her head on the shoulder of the lover sitting next to her and sighing, asks when her daughter will realize that their love is real. Cecile assumes that the Duke of Marmontel has invited them to take her as his wife, and if so, she is not going to refuse him. Ander replies that it's not a good idea. Cecile rebukes her mother's lover for minding his own business. The man replies that he is only giving her family advice and nothing more, since marriage to the Duke will be the beginning of all her troubles. The woman asks why he thinks so, since this Duke has a lot of money and is probably a very caring and loving man. Ander gently wraps both hands around her face and calls Madame very naive, and asks her if she really believes it. Glancing at a disgruntled Cécile, he tells them that the king has a bad relationship with the Duke of Marmontel because his father was encroaching on the throne, and so the king has spies on the Duke to watch his every move. And people say interesting things about him. Andre has heard that he's been dubbed the Emperor of Red Light Night. Plus, they say he's dining with anti-government forces. After hearing all this, the woman grabs Andre by the collar of his white shirt and asks if everything he told her is true. The man confirms it. Her mother turns to Cécile and asks her to forget about Count Marmontel's money, as she does not consider him a worthy match for her daughter. Andre confirms this and tells Cécile that she has a head on her shoulders, so there is no reason to marry the Duke. Cécile abruptly gets up from her chair and loudly slaps her palm on the table, saying that none of this has anything to do with Andre, and that's why she came in a pastel blue dress. The man is startled by Cécile's subtle, unexpectedly, and full of aggression action. The girl places her pearl and blue gemstone earrings on the table and adds that it's all to lure the Duke. There is a sepulchral silence in the room. Cécile stands by the table with her arms crossed over her chest, looking at her mother and her lover, who are frightened for her. Cécile walks to the window and pensively looks out at the view beyond. Her mother comes up to her and asks her daughter if she meant what she said. The girl starts to explain to her mother what will happen if the Duke takes her, but the woman interrupts her and tells Cécile that she doesn't have to marry him and suggests finding someone better. The girl turns to her mother and tells her that she doesn't think anyone but the Duke of Montmartel would agree to take her as a wife, given their current situation. She turns to the demon standing in the corner of the room with her arms crossed and continues to talk about how she never dreamed of a love marriage to begin with, since in secular circles, marriage is a kind of business. And with anger in her face, appeals to him that it will be okay. And no matter how hard it will be, she makes a promise to herself that for nothing in the world will not sell her soul to a demon. At sunset, Cécile decides to go outside for some fresh air after this discussion, and leaning on the edge of the fountain, she reflects on the fact that she must remain strong because she can only count on herself. The demon Azrael stands behind her and asks her if this is her response to his offer to sell her soul. Cécile turns to the demon and urges him to leave since she doesn't need his help. Azrael is not satisfied with this answer, and grabbing the girl by the throat tells her that he is the kind of man who likes to leave the best for last, and that he will always be there for her, so she can call him at any time, and disappears without a trace. Cécile held onto her neck where the demon's hand had been recently, thinking that it looked like he was really nearby. The next day, the girl decides to take a walk alone in the garden. Azrael also tries to attract her attention by calling her name a few times. She turns to the demon and asks him to stop doing that, and then asks him why he's always hanging around her, since she told him earlier that she would never sign his pact. Cécile asks Azrael to find someone else to give him his soul. The demon explains to the girl that he doesn't like long conversations and only wants her soul. At the same time, a couple passing by wonder why Cécile is talking to herself, since the demon is not visible to them. Azrael snaps his fingers and everyone around him freezes. Everything around them turns black and white for Cécile and the demon. The man takes note of something that should be less awkward now. Cécile asks him about what he just did. The demon explains to her that he only stopped time for a short while because he doesn't want it to look like she's not talking to anyone. The girl doesn't know why, but the demon kept appearing in front of her. One day, when she was talking to her acquaintance, Azrael reappears behind her back. Sooner or later, of course, it would end, and he would disappear again like nothing had happened. But he would reappear. Cécile was having tea one afternoon, sitting quietly at a small table. Azrael reappears next to her, sitting on the sofa. The man asks Cécile if she is all right, and gives her his pink handkerchief so she can wipe the spilled tea off her face. She looks at him and thinks that her soul is the only thing he wants from her. But after that, he never brought up the subject of the contract again. She wonders what he is up to in such a case. Cécile takes the pink handkerchief from his hands and thanks him for his concern. At night, lying in the cow, and the girl still cannot sleep from the flow of thoughts in her head. She remembers that next week she will have to meet the Duke of Marmontel. She still can't sleep and thinks she needs to clear her thoughts so she can sleep. Azrael appears behind her again. Leaning over her body, Cecile offers to sing a lullaby for her, and then snaps his fingers, stopping time. The girl jumped up fearfully, holding her blanket with both hands, and asked the demon to leave the room immediately. The man rips the blanket out of the girl's hands and moving closer to her, asks what she will do to him if he refuses to leave. Cecile explains to him that if he dares to touch her again, she will bite off his tongues and kill him. Azrael wonders if this is what they teach them at the Institute of Noble Maidens. He notices the useless things they teach there. Cecile dodges the demon and asks him to let her go. The demon agrees to let the girl go and turns his face away and asks her if she regrets that he didn't kiss her. Without answering his question, Cecile asks her own and asks why he addresses her in the first name. The demon is surprised by this unexpected question. With his head down on his palm, Azrael asks Cecile if she means that she wants him to address her as you. After a little thought, Cecile replies that it would be better if he continues to address her as you. Then the demon leaned his finger on the girl's forehead and put her into a deep sleep, as it was already late, and holding her in his arms promised that he would make sure that no one and nothing would disturb Cecile's sound sleep. He puts the girl on the bed and covers her with a blanket with care, looking at her and thinking that it is very exciting for him to be near her. He is glad that Cecile appeared in his life. The next day, Azrael stands in front of the window, immersed in memories of his early encounters with Cecile. The first time he met a girl with curled hair and a dress adorned with roses, she was just some kind of entertainment to him. On the day of his third and second visit, Cecile was sad about something and tears were streaming down her cheeks. Azrael felt sorry for her. And the third time he saw Cecile in a serious condition lying on the bed, the demon was afraid for her and couldn't just give up. With a shaking hand, he pulled Cecile into his arms, making sure she was unconscious, but still alive. These encounters with her have changed Azrael. Meeting Cecile again for the fourth time at a recent reception, he realized that he wanted to protect her soul, and if such a repetitive life is her destiny, this time he decides to break the order himself and change her life. He was interrupted by a member of the Demon Society, and noticed that Azrael was not present at the next meeting, as well as at the previous one. The demon turns around and asks a man in a white mask with a long nose if he's come by chance to reprimand him for being absent from meetings a couple times. He explains to Azrael that they have definitions of the job they must fulfill, and asks him to temper his personal motives. Putting both hands behind her head and closing her eyes, Azrael asks not to worry, as nothing out of the ordinary has happened. The masked man asks the red-eyed demon how much longer he can follow this girl, as there are plenty of souls like her in the world, and asks him why he is attached to Cecile. Azrael explains to the man that this is the fourth attempt to take Cecile's soul, but now he has realized that he just can't give up, no matter what it all has to do with him, and tells him that he has to understand him. Unexpectedly for the masked man named Mephisto, Azrael puts his hand on his back and asks him if he himself has not felt attached to someone. Mephisto turns around sharply and hints with his tone of voice and movement that Azrael should stop acting like this, asking stupid questions. As he takes his hands off the man, Azrael explains that he was only asking, and it was just a silly joke, as that is all that amuses him in his boring life. Meanwhile, in his estate sits at a small table with a cup of tea on it Count Marmontel and reads a letter. A girl in a pink dress comes up to him and rejoices that she has finally found the Count. She asks him what happened, as she noticed that he was drinking tea in his bed again instead of at the table. She puts her hand on the Earl's shoulder and asks him why he doesn't want to have tea with her. Count Marmontel looks thoughtfully at one point and throws back the girl's hand, which gives her a slight shock. She notices that the Count is in a bad mood today. After thinking it over, Marmontel asks the girl to pack her things and go to Marseille. The Count adds to his words that he will give her his villa near his estate, and there she can start a new life. Concerned by such a speech from the Count, the girl falls on her knees, grabs his hand and asks him what he means, and if he is not talking about kicking her out, but in that case, she just can't imagine her life without him. She asks the Count if he no longer loves her as he used to. Marmontel explains to her that it is not that at all, but that he does not want to show her to the girl who will soon become his wife. And in order not to offend his mistress, he tells her that they have known each other for a long time, so she can turn to him at any time. He will always be able to help her. A girl replies to a count named Arnaud that it would be better if he told her that he didn't love her anymore, as it would explain everything more, and asks him why he needs another woman. Didn't he say that they would marry? Count Marmontel rudely asks his mistress to be sensible and asks her if she has accidentally forgotten her place. He explains to her that he dare not even dream of having a Marmontel prostitute as his wife. A girl with sorrow in her heart falls at the Duke's feet. The man asks her to do him a favor and leave quietly. At this time, he is informed that guests have arrived at his house. The Duke is delighted that everything is going according to his plan. He was about to leave to meet the guests, but his mistress stops him by asking him to stay here for at least another week, and she promises to keep a low profile and not to be seen by anyone. Duchess Marmontel agrees to this request and leaves the room. Meanwhile, Cécile, her mother, and Andy sit down on one of the balconies. Her mother tells her lover that she didn't know he had reserved seats for all of them. Ander moves the woman's chair with care and wonders if he can't even do that. Cécile ignores the couple and looks at the other guests on the other balconies. She notices her uncle Jacques holding binoculars in his hand and talking passionately to a woman in a bright green dress. Cécile doesn't understand what the impudent man is doing here. Through his binoculars, he spots his cousin and aunt. When he comes to them, he mockingly asks them what they are doing here, if they have extra money to see the opera. And when he looks up and looks at André, he guesses that it was his aunt's lover who arranged it for them. He adds to his words that he didn't know she was still dating that brat. André resents being called that. Cécile approaches her uncle and asks him to leave them without making too much noise. Noticing her sister, Jacques smirks and asks her not to make such an expression and notices that Cécile is prettier when she smiles. The girl asks her uncle why he thinks she should smile. Jacques grinningly asks her not to blame him since it was her father who gave him his fortune. Clutching her black fan in her hands, Cécile's mother informs Ander that she is not in the mood to see the opera today and suggests that he leave the theater. André, seeing the sadness in his lover's face, agrees to her request and calls Cécile to leave the theater. Jacques doesn't let his sister leave the balcony at once, and grabbing her shoulder tells her that he has heard that she is marrying that old man who hates the king and asks her if it is true. The man tells her that if she is with him, he will give her a much better life than with some old man. Cécile slaps him on the arm and asks her uncle if he's tired of being humiliated yet. She explains to him that she thinks this old man is much better than someone like him, and at least his fortune and power are much greater than Jacques', and if she becomes the Duke's wife, her uncle will not be a problem for her. The man's angered by these words. He shouts her name. Cécile leaves the balcony and sees André on the way out, comforting her mother. He puts his arm around her shoulder and tells her that there is no need for tears. The woman apologizes to her lovers for not being able to see the opera because of her. Ander tells her that it is not a big deal and they can watch the opera later. Cécile looks at her mother and her lover and walks to the edge of the corridor, leaning on the edge of the wall, thinking about the fact that she is shaking and does not understand how Jacques had the courage to say such a thing, and he could have hit her in a fit of anger. Cécile turns around and sees the demon Azrael beside her, placing his palm on her hand and telling her with a smile on his face that if Doc dared to hit her, he would rip him to shreds immediately. The girl asks the demon to let go of her hand without any response, and after he agrees, she wipes her hands with a handkerchief. Azrael is hurt by this reaction and asks Cécile to stop treating him like a bacteria because it hurts. Cécile looks at her hand and notices that it is no longer shaking as it was a while ago. She asks the man if he has come to persuade her to sell her soul again. Azrael tells her that she should be used to it by now. Anyway, he asks her not to worry so much, because there is not a single man in this world who would not fall in love with her, and this Duke Marmontel is no exception. Cécile asks the demon if he is in love with her in that case, since he is also a man, and from what he says, he must have feelings for her too. Azrael is stunned by such a question, and after a brief silence, leaning on the side of the curb with a smile, answers Cécile that he is not just a man and a demon. The girl finds it boring that Azrael didn't even look embarrassed in any way, and with his head proudly raised, turns around in the other direction, walking away from the demon. The man trails off and tells her that if he wasn't in love with her, he would be standing here with her and giving his support. The next day, Cécile and her mother take a carriage to the Duke of Marmontel's estate for a ball. Looking out the window, the girl thinks that since the Duke is organizing the ball, it means that besides her, other candidates for marriage have received invitations. She wonders whether she will be able to attract the Duke's attention against the background of the daughters of aristocratic families, or whether she will have time to talk to him in the meantime. Cécile decides that she should stop screwing herself up, and everything will be decided at the ball. Her mother notices that they are almost there and asks Cécile not to worry so much, and suggests that she imagine that she is going there just to have fun. The girl notices her mother shaking, and notices that she seems to be worried more than her. The woman denies it, as she thinks that she can't be worried because it's not the first time she's been here. They arrive at their destination. The butlers of the Duke of Marmontel's estate, dressed in blue tuxedos, help Cécile's mother out of the carriage. When the woman has reached the end of her descent, she looks up and notices an acquaintance named Mirfa, the Marquis's wife. The old woman greets the guests. Cécile's mother concludes that Mirfa has also been invited to the Duke's ball and is so relieved that she has met some familiar faces here. Meanwhile, Cécile is also helped off the wagon. They all head towards the entrance of the huge house, climbing the stairs. At this time, she explains that she is staying at the manor for a short time at the request of the Duke himself. The woman notices Cécile walking behind her and tells her she is glad to see her. When Mirfa reaches the entrance, assuming that the guests are tired from the journey, she suggests that they go inside the building. Cécile notices something. Looking up at the windows of the top floor, she sees the dark silhouette of a woman. She gets the feeling that someone has been watching them closely since their arrival. Mirfa tells them that the Duke is now in the shadow room after going inside and up the white staircase. Cécile's mother notices that it is rather quiet for a ball and asks her acquaintance if she thinks so. The old woman replies that she hasn't heard anything about the ball. Cécile's mother says she remembers that the Duke invited them to the ball. Mirfa suggests that there may have been some mistake. And as far as she knows, there are no other guests in the house except for her, Cécile, her mother, Madame Mercier, so the ball is not planned. The door creaks open and Mirfa points to Cécile and her mother and smilingly informs Duke Marmontel that his guests have arrived. The girl sees the Duke of Marmontel with a red bow tied on his wig looking thoughtfully out the window. He turns to the arriving guests and greets them. Everyone in the room sits down on armchairs. The Duke explains that it is hard for him to choose a wife and that Aunt Mirfa's words are true, but in fact he did not organize any ball and invited only the two of them to his estate. The Duke of Marmontel has invited them to talk about the upcoming wedding and informs Madame Mercier that he wants to take her daughter Cécile as his wife. The woman is a little perturbed by this proposal and questions him about what he said to be sure. Madame Mercier and an elderly lady, Mirfa, are standing in the street behind the Duke and Cécile. The girl's mother tells her acquaintance that this marriage proposal is very sudden. Mirfa asks the madam not to worry as they recommended her daughter to the Duke, but he chose Cécile himself. In addition, the king has approved the wedding, and Cécile will now become the Duchess of Marmontel. The girl stands next to the Duke and looks down at the ground, wondering if she can marry him. The Duke interrupts the awkward silence by saying that he realizes that this is all very sudden, but he hopes that they can live happily ever after, even if they have a big age difference. Cécile replies that age is not a problem for her. The Duke asks the girl not to 30 the obvious since he knows what he's talking about, and thinks he doesn't deserve a young and beautiful girl like Cécile. The man apologizes in advance for his shamelessness, but he has one request for her. Cécile agrees to listen to him. The Duke tells her that he only wants two things from her, that she should bear him an heir and not leave him, and then all this will become her property, and places on her palm an expensive necklace with 10 precious blue stones and diamonds around them. Cécile admires the gorgeous necklace. The Duke of Marmontel explains that it's his wedding gift to her. It is a family heirloom worn by the Marmontel family. The image of a girl hugging her shoulders, her copy to amuse her, as now everything will be as she wanted. Now there is no need to worry about any debts, and all the aristocratic families will kiss her and her mother's feet. The image that looks like Cecile is replaced by the demon Azrael. He tells her that if she is patient, the Duke will soon leave this world and she will be free to live. Cecile asks the demon to stop abusing her. He agrees that he has gone a little overboard. The girl answers him that everything is fine, and she does not need to wait for the Duke's death. As soon as she fulfills his requests, then she can live a quiet life. The visions are interrupted and the girl returns to reality. The Duke asks Cecile if she will accept his marriage proposal. There is still a demon standing behind her. The girl agrees to the Duke's proposal to marry him. Cecile mentally replies to the demon Azrael that he will not be able to give her everything she wants, and everything will be meaningless if she cannot get what she wants by her own efforts. At night, Cecile stands at the mirror, changing into a blue dress and trying on a necklace given by the Duke, thinking that at least after marriage, Jacques will no longer humiliate her and the debts will be over. The girl recalls the Duke's requests to bear him an heir and not abandon him. It seems simple enough to her. The things she must do when she becomes the Duke of Marmontel's wife will not cause any difficulties, and he does not ask her to love herself. Cecile takes off her family jewelry Marmontel and takes a candlestick with 3 lit candles and goes out into the dark corridor and keeps thinking that if she accepts all these conditions, then it can be said that this place is now her home. All his possessions, villas, rights, everything that belongs to the Duke. Distracted from her thoughts, she hears a noise, which seems strange to her, since it is late in the evening. The candles she holds in her hands go out in an instant. Going down the stairs, she notices 2 servants asking someone if it is all luggage, and if all the things are loaded, then it is okay to go. Cecile notices under her cloak the face of a girl she knows quite well. She guesses that she is the Duke's mistress. She did not know that there were other guests in the house besides them. Cecile calls out to Madame Zofram. She turns around and wonders how she knows her. Cecile apologizes for her indiscretion, as she should have introduced herself first. She tells the Duke's mistress that she is the daughter of Madame Mercier and will become the wife of the Duke of Marmontel. Zofram is not very happy about this acquaintance. She wryly accuses the girl of being from a strange family. Zofram tells Cecile that he thought that the Dukes would choose a more worthy person to marry and that he had high hopes for her. And since she is already leaving, she asks permission to say one last thing to the future wife of the Duke. A negative atmosphere hangs between the girls. Cecile agrees, and if this advice will be useful to her, she will definitely listen to it. Zofram advises the girl to keep her current image in her mind, because one day she will be in her place and can say with certainty that Cecile will never be able to give the Duke what he wants, and then asks permission to divert and leave the estate. Cecile, in the wake of the departing mistress, tells her that she is sure of something, because she was able to get what Madame Zofram so long sought, namely to get a marriage proposal from the Duke. The mistress is angered by Cecile's words to her. Clenching her teeth and clenching her hands into fists, she asks the servants if her carriage is ready and, after confirming, leaves the Duke's estate. Cecile had some anxiety about the words spoken by Madame Zofram, but she overcame her worries and their wedding ceremony with the Duke of Marmontel took place. She stands with the Duke at the altar in white suits, making vows of love that didn't really exist between them. At the time, she took such a thing as marriage rather lightly. Cecile thought that a loveless marriage would not make her unhappy, and the most important thing for her was to be stable on her feet. During the wedding ceremony, a girl in a pink and green dress comes up to Azrael and bowing asks the demon if he called her. The man tells the girl that from now on she will have a lot of work, as she will need to befriend the wife of the Duke of Marmontel. Madame Contra turns around and asks the demon if it is the girl in the veil with the roses, the one he has been looking for so long. Azrael confirms her hunch and asks her to try to entertain Cecile by gradually destroying the world she knows, and then she will become his by willingly giving up her soul. Madame Contra agrees to do as the demon tells her. Azrael, meanwhile, is distracted by the voice of a young man asking William where he is going. The demon turns back and sees the same man named William with long and dark brown hair and a blue tailcoat. His brother with long blonde hair runs after him and asks his brother to wait for him. Looking at William, the demon thinks about the fact that this man, oddly enough, seems quite familiar to him, but not realizing where and when he has seen him before. Running out into the corridor after his brother, the young man, leaning on the railing, asks him to wait for him again and asks if he is really going to leave the event because he is so rarely present at royal weddings. William looks at his brother with his deep azure eyes and asks him what the point of attending these weddings is if they are no different from each other. As he leaves, he says he'd rather rest in his room. The red-haired young man asks him worriedly if he will attend the ball tonight. William ponders what to do in this case, as he has tried to avoid attending the event. His brother reminds him that his father wanted him to come and looks at him pityingly and asks him not to let him down. The man realizes that there is nothing to be done and agrees to come to the ball. His brother is pleased with this answer, and before William leaves, tells him that they will see each other later. Crossing his arms on his chest, he looks in the wake of his brother William and thinks about what happened to him that she is so indifferent to everything around him. He seems to be angry about something. The night of the ball was the most unforgettable night of her life, for the star of it was none other than Cécile. In a blue dress and feathers in her hair, she danced a waltz with the Duke of Marmontel. That very night she met William. The Duke, holding Cécile's hand, notices that she looks tired. The girl asks if she really looks that way and explains that she is overexcited and tired. She tells her husband that she should get some fresh air. The Duke lets her go and asks her not to worry about the guests and to rest. Cécile replies that she will be back soon, as it would be rude of her to be away for so long. As the girl leaves the ballroom, her uncle Jacques watches. He is angry that now that Cécile is married, he cannot say anything to her. Meanwhile, Albert's father calls his son and nephew to him and says that they should attend the Duke of Marmontel in person, as he is English, and it will be good for them to know this. Thinking that he is uneasy about his upcoming meeting with Cécile, Willie leaves his uncle and brother. Albert tells his father that he is a little scared. The Lord tells his son not to worry as everything will be fine. They approach the Duke of Marmontel and congratulate him on his wedding. The Duke greets Lord Billinker. He thanks him for his congratulations and asks who the man next to him is. Lord Billinker tells him he has long wanted to introduce them. He first introduces his son Albert, the young man bowing to the Duke to show his respect. The Lord then points to the empty seat next to him, introducing his nephew, the Earl of Rohan. Albert turns in the direction his father is pointing and notices that William has disappeared. The Lord then notices the disappearance and calls his nephew an obnoxious boy. Cécile is strolling through the greenhouse, which is lined with different kinds of flowers. She thinks about how nice it is to feel the breeze after the unbearable heat in the ballroom. When she hears a rustle behind her, she turns around and sees her uncle Jacques dressed in a red tailcoat. He smirked at her, noting that it had been a long time since they had seen each other. Cécile doesn't understand what the jerk is doing in the greenhouse, and she notices that he smells strongly of alcohol. Jacques congratulates his sister on her marriage, so no one in his opinion could have thought that she would become the spouse of the Duke. And reminding Cécile that she should observe etiquette, she bows and asks him to accept his congratulations. The girl realizes that it is now dangerous to be here, as there is no one around. She decides that she should leave as soon as possible. Jacques does not let her leave him, and grabbing her arm asks her where she is going and if she intends to avoid him for the rest of her life. The girl pulls his arm away and starts screaming loudly. William walks to the greenhouse as he hears someone shouting from here. As he prepares to enter, he draws his sword from its sheath. Cécile and Jacques continue to argue with each other. The man cries out in pain, grabbing his arm and telling his sister that she seems to be crazy. The girl replies to Jacques that he is the only one who is crazy. Cécile asks her uncle how he dared to touch her since he has no right to do so. Jacques grinningly asks his sister if she's not scared by accident and if she's going to dare him again. At that moment, Wilhelm sneaks up from behind and puts his sword to Cécile's throat and asks him to move away from her. Jacques is startled by this and slowly turns around, raising his hands toward the man in the white suit with the sword in his hand. William again threateningly demands that he step away from the girl. Jacques runs out of the conservatory, scared out of his wits. Cécile looks after him and thinks that the bastard will not get off so easily and will be punished for his actions. William holds out his hand to the girl and asks her if she is okay. She confirms that she is. Cecile does not understand how she can forget that night, that moment when she first met this man. Back at the house, Cecile thanks William for his help, as if it were not for him there would have been trouble. The man doesn't answer and tries to get away from Cecile as quickly as possible, as he tried to avoid seeing her all evening. But it didn't work. He doesn't understand why it happened. The girl blocks his way and won't let him leave without listening. Cecile tells William that he is her savior, and therefore she is indebted to him. The Count tells her that it's just a trifle and not to make such a big deal out of it. The girl continues to insist and explains to him that she will not rest until she helps him in return. William is distracted by the moment when he first saw Cecile. Suffering from topographical cretinism, he again fails to hear where he is going and seems lost in the house. But he must find his way, as his brother Albert is obviously waiting for him. William turns around and sees Cecile talking to someone he guesses to be Count Marmontel's fiancé. The girl is called to her by her mother. As Cecile walked past the Count, they looked at each other. William had fallen in love with the betrothed girl at first sight that day, but the line must not be crossed. That's why he tried to avoid their meeting. The Count asks Cecile to forget about thoughts of helping him in return, as he is just an ordinary passerby, and that's the end of it. The girl sees off his gaze and ponders what it is with him, but even so, she still can't remain indebted to him. Cecile asks the man to wait and grabs his arm to keep him from leaving, but he roughly and sharply pulls her arm away from him. There was silence between them, as William was worried about the fact that he had thrown the girl's arm away so sharply, it came out of reflex. Cecile ponders why the man did this, assuming that he just doesn't like her, but that doesn't change the fact that he has acted in a most tactless way towards her. William is concerned about this and thinks about what he should do in this situation. A little later, his brother Albert runs up to him, saying that he has been looking for him for a long time and calling him by name. The young man is surprised to see the wife of the Duke of Marmontel standing in front of him. Cecile turns around and asks the man if his name is really William. He is not very pleased that the girl recognized his name. Albert asks his brother what he is doing alone with the Duke's wife. The girl asks Albert and his brother if they are foreigners. The young man apologizes for not introducing himself to her at once and tells her that he is the son of the ambassador from England, Lord Bilanker. He then introduces Cecile to his cousin, the Earl of Rohan. The girl looks at William and reflects that this is the first time she has seen such impertinent behavior. She tells his brother that the Earl of Rohan has given her invaluable help, but refuses to accept the reward. Albert asks Cecile what has happened. At the same time, Demon Azrael was watching their conversation. He finally remembered where he had seen William, and that's why he seemed familiar to him, as if he had met him somewhere before. The demon saw him in Cecile's past life. He was her lover and husband. It seems impossible to him that they will be together in this life. Azrael realizes that he will have a very hard time in this case, and he wonders whether he can help her or not. Before going to sleep, Cecile recalls the moment when she was standing with Albert and William, and she asked him to ask her to dance, extending her hand. The man bows and apologizes for having to refuse such a request because he has no talent for it. His cousin is outraged by this act. As Cecile puts on her robe, she says in a low voice how shameless he is. The maid asks the girl why she said it. Cecile raises her head and apologizes to Marianne for not saying it to her. She explains that she is so tired from the day that she is not paying attention to her words. The maid replies that she understands her perfectly. At that time, Duke Marmontel comes knocking into the room and tells the hearing that if she is finished, she can go. Marianne leaves the room with her eyes down on the floor. The Duke sits down on the couch in front of Cecile and tells her that he heard that guy Jacques tried to hurt her, and asks the girl if by any chance they are related. Cecile asks her husband to ignore it because Jacques was only drunk. The Duke explains to her that he has heard from the Marquise that this is not the first time something like this has happened. The girl tells him it will never happen again. Without letting her finish, the Duke asks if there is no special relationship between her and her uncle Jacques. Cecile categorically denies this and asks the Duke how he could allow the idea that there is something between them. The Duke of Marmontel grabs Cécile by the arm and sits her on his lap and tells her that he doesn't care about her past, but he does care to know whether she is a virgin or not. He explains to her that only then will he be able to understand whether his descendants will really be his. Cécile asks her husband whether he wanted to humiliate her like this from the beginning. He tells her that he never had such thoughts and asks her not to think about it. The girl rises from the Duke's lap and, holding his robe, tells him that she will soon check whether he is lying or not, but has something to add. Cécile reminds him that she is his wife and Duchess of the Marmontel family and asks him to treat her with respect. The Duke is outraged by this insolence and stands up from his chair and tells Cécile that she seems to have misunderstood something. She is now his property, so he decides how to treat her. And as he tucks Cécile into bed, he asks her to remember one thing. He's the only one who can give orders around here, and until she bears him an heir, he asks her to be quiet and fulfill all the duties of a wife. Cécile thinks that if one word were to describe this night, it could only be dislike. She had only expressed her thoughts at the time, but she had been sharply rebuked. From the beginning, her opinion was not something that really mattered to her husband, the Duke. Cécile wakes up when the demon Azrael, dressed in a yellow vest, appears in her room. He wakes her up, wishing her good morning. Cécile wakes up with her eyes open and asks the demon what he is doing here so early and if he has come to mock her. Azrael answers her that he does not wish it in any way, but has come to comfort her. Cécile tells him that she's not interested in his silly jokes right now. The demon says that she should not have married him. The girl answers him that she is much more resilient than he thinks, and until she bears him a son, she will be able to bear it. Azrael notices that Cécile is thinking about another man on the very first night. The girl asks the demon who he's talking about. He explains to her that it is about that tactless gentleman, and I think his name was William. Cécile denies that she's thinking about the man and turns her head away to ask the demon why he's even interested in who she's thinking about. She explains to Azrael, lying at her feet, that she would not like to meet this man again. The demon asks Cécile what the reason is and tells her that she and William will meet more than once. The girl clarifies what he means. Azrael replies that he meant what he said because her husband, Duke Marmontel, invited William's family to the mansion. Sitting in the carriage going to the Marmontel family home, Albert asks his brother not to behave rudely to the Duke's wife there, as he believes that he is not really a wicked and ill-mannered man. The young man asks William to answer why he is behaving this way towards Cécile. The Count replies that since they are brothers, he believes he can keep his secret. Albert promises his brother that he will never tell him anything. Since there have never been any secrets between them, William can trust him. The carriage, meanwhile, has already pulled into the grounds of the mansion. Cécile and the Duke of Marmontel are sitting on opposite sides of a table set with many dishes. The Duke asks the butler next to him for water. The girl looks at the husband sitting opposite her reading a letter and ponders the fact that he invited guests without even consulting her. It occurs to her that the Duke has deliberately kept silent about it. Cécile decides to talk about it and tells Arnaud that there are rumors among the servants that someone is coming to visit them. The Duke replies that the maids always know everything. The girl notices that it seems that in this house only she has no idea who their guests are today. The man replies to Cécile that if she is still bothered by yesterday's incident, and he apologizes for it. She replies to her spouse that it's fine and she was just asking. The Duke tells Cécile that at Lord Billinker's request, his son and nephew will stay at their house for a few weeks. Besides, the Earl of Rohan saved her life, so he thought there would be no claim. She is about the same age with him, so she thinks that his wife and the Count will find a common language and she will not be bored. Cécile replies to the Duke that even so, a guest is still a guest. Aaron asks the girl if she thinks it's the wife's role to entertain the guests. In general, he is sure that Cécile can fulfill this role. She clenches her hand into a fist, angry that the Duke has misunderstood her and that this is not the point. The servants inform the gentleman that the guests have arrived. The man is surprised at how quickly they have arrived. He gets up from the table and asks Cécile if she will go with him to meet the guests. The girl extends her hand to him and agrees to go with him. Cecile thinks that she has no other choice and will try not to cross paths with William if possible. The Duke and his wife greet the Count and his cousin. Albert thanks the Duke of Marmontel for the invitation and tells him that they really didn't know where to stay, so they are very happy to stay with them for a while. The Duke promises not to disturb them as long as they make themselves at home. William glances at Cecile standing next to the Duke, and his cousin notices. Albert is replaying the dialogue with his brother in the carriage. He questions William about what he has just said. The Earl explains that the Duchess is very much like the girl he has seen in his dreams since he was a child. Albert asks him if he realizes that it is impossible to fall in love with the Duchess, and besides, it is just a dream. William replies that it's not just a dream for him. For a dream, he remembers everything too clearly, and the same moments are repeated time after time, as if she is asking him to find her constantly reminding him of himself, and he can't just ignore it. Albert asks his brother what he is going to do about it. William asks him not to worry about it as he tries to erase the Duchess from his mind, but thanks him for his help anyway. Albert can't believe that William has fallen in love with a married girl. If such a noble and decent man does such a foolish thing, then he can be given away. And if he stains his face, his father will stop comparing them. When Cecile first came to the Duke of Marmontel's mansion, it seemed so spacious. But after Wilm arrived, the house became very cramped. They are constantly bumping into each other. Cecile doesn't understand how he dares to walk back and forth in her house, what he's trying to tell her. The girl asks the maid Marion to prepare her dress for tonight. At this moment, she notices William. She does not understand where he came from, but there is nothing to do, and he decides to just say hello and pass by. Suddenly, the demon Azrael appears from somewhere and grabs Cecile and hides her behind him, so as not to show her to William, who was passing by and reading a book. The girl thanks the demon for it, even though she doesn't know how he did it. He replies to her that Fix-It is a really fun game and asks her to play with him too. Cecile asks the man why he thinks she's having fun with it. Azrael tells her sarcastically that she looks like a silly girl who is having a lot of fun. Cecile and Albert are sitting at a small table playing chess. The young man asks the Duchess for permission to ask her something. She agrees to listen to him. Albert asks her if she feels comfortable around William. The girl denies it, saying that it is all lies and nothing more. Albert explains to Cecile that William is rather cold and bad at expressing his emotions, so people often don't understand him, and such impolite treatment of her that evening was not serious. Cecile clarifies what he was serious about, and tells Albert that if William wants to break the misunderstanding between them, he should come to her in person. And when she's finished, she checkmate her opponent. Albert is surprised that he lost to her again. Cecile gets up from the table and thanks the boy for playing with her, as the Duke is not very fond of chess, and in this, they are different, and adds that thanks to him she had fun. Albert then asks her if he can ask her for something. Cecile agrees to his request to talk to William even though she won. This request seemed obvious to her. Cecile goes to the greenhouse where William is at the moment, and when she approaches him, she notices that he is asleep, so she cannot talk to him now. She thinks that the best option is to visit him later. Admiring the sleeping Count reflects on the fact that he is undeniably handsome, but if he were not so closed, he would not be rejected. Suddenly, out of the blue, William wakes up. Cecile apologizes for waking him and says she is leaving. The man stops Cecile as he has something to say to her. Even if she is uncomfortable in his company, William asks the girl to listen to him quickly. Cecile turns to him and claims that she has never said that his company is unpleasant for her. The Count explains his conclusions by the fact that as soon as Cecile sees him, she tries to avoid meeting him, and if the reason is not her dislike for him, then what is it? These words confirm Cecile's guess that he has been seeing her all this time. The girl asks William what he's getting at. The man rises abruptly from the bed. He explains that he only wanted to apologize for his tactless behavior the last time they met at the ball and asks Cecile to generously forgive him. Looking into his deep azure eyes, the girl notices that this glint in his eyes seems quite familiar to her. Of course, dozens of other men have looked at her with exactly the same look, and this glint in his eyes appears only when someone wants something from her. But she can't give William what he wants from her. At this point, Cecile gets an image of her father telling her that he didn't teach her that, and advises her to first find out his secret desires and pretend to give him what he wants, but actually find it to her advantage. And if Cecile wants to get a confession from him, she must do as he tells her to do, then it will confirm her loyalty. Covering her ears, the girl tells her father that she doesn't want to listen to him and banishes him from her head. Cecile agrees to accept William's apology, and besides, she needed a stronger rival than his cousin Albert. And holding out her hand to him, she reflects on the fact that she is afraid of her habits that have been with her since childhood. Her father's inheritance has always been ahead of her mind. At first, Cecile just wanted to get her father's recognition, but after he is gone, she doesn't understand why she is acting like this. The girl asks Count Rohan if he is good at chess. William kisses the girl's hand and tells her that he is quite good at chess. Cecile asks the Count if he is looking forward to their game. Meanwhile, Madame Mercier talks to Elizabeth about a love potion. Cecile's mother was once convinced that it really helps and tells the girl that she would like to give it to her daughter. Elizabeth asks the woman if the leader is the Duchess, but she has heard that she and the Duke of Marmontel have a good relationship and asks Madame Mercier if they have any problems. Covering her mouth with her hand, the woman remembers that Cecile had asked her not to tell anyone. Madame Contra is outraged that it is a secret to her, as she thought that she and Madame Mercier have such a strong friendship. Cecile's mother confirms that they do have such a friendship, but asks her to promise not to tell anyone about it. In fact, it's been quite some time since Cecile and Duke Marmontel's wedding, but there's still no news of a pregnancy from them. So Cecile began to worry about it, thinking that the problem might be her, and it would be good if she could give the Duke an heir as soon as possible. Elizabeth asks Madame Mercier if she can meet the Duchess in that case, and whether her mother thinks it would be better to go to the girl's house with her. The woman thanks Madame Contra for her help. Cecile is walking in the garden near the lake with William and Albert. Holding a lace umbrella over her head, she suggests they go boating as the weather is just fine. Albert, raising his hands, refuses because he is afraid of the water, and pushing his brother William offers Cecile a boat ride with him. The Duchess agrees since one man is enough to row the oar and suggests that Count Rohan go on a water trip. They get into a boat and sail away from the shore. William notices that Cecile looks worried and asks her what is troubling her. The girl asks him if he thought so, and the Count confirms it. Cecile apologizes to him for making him worry about her with his appearance. William replies that it's all right, and on the contrary, he was wondering if he could do something to help her as a friend. Coughing, the Duchess explains to Count Rohan that such words should not be spoken so lightly and asks if he thinks he can help her. Cecile explains her problem to William, saying that she is trying hard but to no avail, and specifies that it is about pregnancy and asks the man how he will help her with it. Count Rohan blushes at this answer and asks Cecile not to joke because he is really worried about her. The girl laughingly replies that she is not joking at all, and yet William has lifted her spirits and thanks him for it. After a walk, Cecile is walking down the corridor, humming a song, when suddenly she notices the maid Marianne running out of Duke Marmontel's room with her hair loose. Cecile asks her what she was doing there like that, but Marianne runs away without answering. Having made her conclusions, the girl runs into her husband's room. The Duke, leaning on the bed, asks Cecile how the walk went. Ignoring this question, Cecile asks the Duke about what happened here. Arnaud reaches out to his wife, but she asks him not to touch her with those dirty hands. The Duke asks why dirty hands. Cecile explains to him that if it happens elsewhere, she will turn a blind eye to it, but in her own house, she will allow it. The man tells his wife that until she gives birth to his child, nothing here belongs to her until then. And here in his house, he has the right to do whatever he wants with his servants and Cecile too. Approaching the girl, Duke Marmontel grabs her by the shoulders, wanting to pull her to him, but Cecile pulls his hands away from her, saying that he can't touch her like that whenever he wants. Everyone's already gathered around the dinner table. Albert notices that the Duke's wife is late. The Duke tells him that Cecile is not feeling well and said she will miss dinner, and since her health must be taken care of, he has already sent a servant with food to his wife's bedroom. The man also asks the guests not to worry about it. Meanwhile, in Cecile's room, the maid Marian sits on her knees at the feet of her mistress and tells her that she will accept any punishment as long as she is not thrown out, because if she remains unemployed, her family will starve to death. And if Cecile agrees to keep her, she swears that she will not be caught. She adds that she came to work in the mansion 2 years ago. Cecile gives the maid a sack of money and says she can live on it. She also explains to Marion that she is letting her go out of pity because her husband is the only one to blame for the situation. So she advises her to run away before the Duke does something wrong. Marianne tearfully grabs the hem of the Duchess's dress and apologizes to her, thanking her for being so helpful. Cecile mentally asks Marianne not to be mistaken, as everything she has done was only for her own sake. Late at night, the demon Azrael asks Cecile to at least eat a little. Looking at the family jewelry, she replies that she won't die if she doesn't eat once. The girl reflects on the fact that the chain she gave to Marion was very dear to her and hopes that she will use it for good. The demon asks Cecile why she called him. The girl explains that she has a request. Azrael is surprised that this is the first time Cecile wants to ask him for something. She asks the demon to find out if her husband has a child out of wedlock. Azrael asks why she needs to know. Cecile tells him that she needs to be sure. While talking to the maid, Cecile asked her if she was pregnant by the Duke. Marion told her that she had not had a child and had not gotten pregnant in 2 years. The girl asks her if there have been any pregnancies among the other maids. Marion replies that she has never heard of any such cases during her time working for the Duke. Cecile comes to think that the problem is not her, but that Duke Marmontel simply cannot have children. The demon interrupts the girl's thoughts and tells her that if she wants him to work for her, she has to make contact. Cecile replies that if he doesn't want to help her, she will pay someone else to do it. Azrael asks what he will get his helper. The girl replies that he will get all the crème de la crème of her soul. Hugging her from behind by the waist, the demon tells her that he wants her kiss. Cecile indignantly moves away from the demon and asks him not to get carried away since all desire is gone, and asks him again if he is writing to her. Azrael replies that he will. In that case, Cecile asks him to come up with another wish. As he leaves, the demon tells her he'll take whatever he wants and to be ready for it. As Cecile watches him go, she ponders the fact that he only wants her soul, which is his reason for always being there for her. The next day, the Duke calls his wife to his office and asks her in a rude tone how she dared to throw out the maid Marion and who allowed her to do so. Cecile explains to him that she didn't kick her out, but only gave her the right to choose, and she used it and will do the same if it happens again. One by one, she will send her out of the mansion. Since he doubts that the Duke wants the maids to run away, giving other men the opportunity to supposedly accidentally see his wife in a bathing suit. The Duke wants to answer Cecile, but is interrupted by the butler, who has come to tell them that they have guests, the Marquis Mercier's wife, and the Count of Contra. Cecile comes out to the guests and apologizes that the Duke is in a bad mood and cannot meet them now. Madame Mercier asks her daughter if something has happened. The girl replies to her mother that everything is fine and there is no need to worry. Madame Contra guesses that it was just a common fight between the couple. Cecile asks Elizabeth if she and her husband have quarrels too. She replies to the Duchess that they have had the same, and if he were still alive, they would still be fighting. Madame Mercier explains to her daughter that Count Contra died during the war. Cecile apologizes to Elizabeth for her tactlessness in not knowing this fact. Madame Contra replies to Cecile that there is nothing wrong with this, as it has been many years since his death, and she is much happier without him. Cecile's mother explains why she brought Elizabeth. The reason is that she knows a lot about medicinal herbs and knows how to use them, and she is quite popular among the nobility. Madame Contra asks not to exaggerate. Cecile notices that her mother is worried about her condition, and apparently she blabbed everything to Madame Contra. Elizabeth confirms that they are concerned about her condition, and she was also curious to see the wife of the Duke of Marmontel himself. Meanwhile, Azrael is trying to find information about Duke Arnaud van de Marmontel's illegitimate children. Walking through the library, he is drawn to a book in which the entire story of the Duke's life is written. He opens the book and looks for a chapter that says something about his children, and finds something. Mephisto appears behind him and asks Azrael not to cross the line. He turns the demon around and takes the book about Duke Marmontel out of his hands. Azrael asks Mephisto what he is doing. The masked man explains his actions by saying that this duke is an important figure in the great stream called history, and he won't let things change because of Azrael's self-interest. The demon sitting on his knees suggests that this change could be good for history. Mephisto refutes this by saying that any little thing can end up in destruction. Their role is to see to it that the world is as God intended it to be, and if something goes wrong, they have to go back to the beginning and repeat until they achieve the desired result. This is Mephisto's fourth attempt at creating a perfect world. He is tired of it all, and this time he hopes to finish what he started and everything will be as it should be. So he won't let Azrael destroy everything just because of his selfishness. Mephisto notices that the pain from his spell has taken a toll on him, and since the demon was about to reveal the veil of their secret to Cecile, he advises him to hurry up, or it will be too late. Azrael clearly didn't see this coming. The next day, André arrives at the Duke's mansion. When he sees Madame Mercier, he embraces her and says that his heart felt that she would be here, and apparently they are destined to be together. Cecile asks Ander when he will take over. The man calls the Duchess angry because she cannot allow him to say hello to his beloved. Cecile, going to the table where the cloths are laid, replies that she does not intend to waste her time because of his greetings. Madame Contra picks up the bright orange fabric and tells André that it is simply gorgeous. The man asks Elizabeth to be careful with it as it is very expensive. William, sitting on the couch holding a book, watches everyone arguing amongst themselves. Madame Contra asks André what the problem is if the cloth is meant for her anyway. Cecile asks her mother's lover to hurry up as she has little time. Madame Mercier asks Ander to pick out a couple of dresses for her too. The girls look with interest at the fabrics for their future dresses. Watching the others, Willie reflects on the fact that he has not had such an atmosphere in his life for a long time, and although he hates noise and turmoil, for some reason it is so warm in his heart. Cecile walks up to Count Rohan and puts a hand to his chin and tells him that he used to smile a lot more than he does now. William recalls a moment in his dream where his name is Charles. The image of a girl named Leah, very much like Cecile, asks him what happened to the cheerful person he used to be. When she hears Willie call her Leia, the girl questions him about what he just said. The man replies that what she assumed is not true at all. And at that moment, realizing that he has mixed up the names, she thinks that she is gradually going mad and can no longer distinguish between the imaginary world and the real one. Cecile assumes that the Earl of Rohan was hurt by her words and tries to apologize for it. William denies being hurt in any way. The night before she went to bed, Cecile sat on the edge of the bed, wondering if Azrael had finished his search for information on the Duke's illegitimate children. She didn't think it would take this long. The demon walks into the girl's room, saying that he is here and so he can guess no more. Cecile looks at Azrael and asks him what happened and why he is so pale. The man tells her that there is nothing to worry about and offers to get to the point. He informs Cecile that everything is as she supposed and the Duke has no children out of wedlock. The girl finds this strange, as people like Duke Marmontel usually have many children out of wedlock, and he has none. Azrael suggests that maybe the Duke just can't have children. Cecile asks the demon if her husband knows about it. The man tells her that he unfortunately does not know. Azrael wants to say something else, but he can't because his heart is racing. Cecile, worried about his condition, asks how bad he is. And with words that she shouldn't worry about him, he falls on Cecile, mentally cursing Mephisto. The girl tries to get out from under his body with great difficulty, as he is very heavy. Gently touching Azrael's face, Cecile feels the demon's fever and asks if he's dizzy. Cecily touching Azrael's face, Cecile feels the demon's fever and asks if he's dizzy. Cecile does not really believe that Azrael is well and notices that he does not look well. Suddenly, Arnaud knocks on the door and asks for permission to enter the room. Cecile panics and tries to figure out what to do. Azrael snaps his fingers and stops time to lie down as he feels like he has indigestion. Cecile asks the demon if someone has harmed him and if there is even a person capable of doing so. The demon does not answer her. The girl does not understand why. He gets up from the bed and tells Cecile that he wants to kiss her. The girl asks Azriel not to change the subject, but he doesn't let her finish and merges with Cecile in a long kiss, and pulls back to say that it was compensation. The Duchess wants to charge him for his deed, but the demon doesn't let her do it. Cecile asks her to be a little selfish for once in her life and live as she wants, not as others expect from her, and he will kill all the obstacles in her way. The next morning, Wilm comes down the stairs and remembers the dream he had again. He begins to feel something for Cecile and doesn't know what to do about it. The Count of Rohan is met downstairs by Madame Contra and notices his pensive appearance and asks what is troubling him. William replies to Elizabeth that he is fine and nothing is troubling him. Madame Contra asks Count Rohan to listen to her because something is bothering her. The man replies that if it will help her, she should tell him. Elizabeth explains that she has not been able to sleep lately and seems to have insomnia, which makes her skin pale. But the most interesting thing is that every night she has the same dream, so distinct that she sometimes can't distinguish it from reality. That got William interested. He asks Elizabeth how realistic the dream is and whether the same person appears in it. The girl believes that the Count has guessed it, and indeed she dreams about the same people every time. Madame Contra asks William if by chance he is having the same dreams. The man confirms this and says that now he wonders why he is having these dreams. Meanwhile, the Count enters his room and asks a servant to see to it that all the invitations he gave him are sent to the list. The Duke turns around and sees Cecile standing on a dais by the bed. She greets her husband and tells him how long she has waited for him. Aaron is surprised that Cecile is in his room and asks her if something has happened, as it is the first time she has come to his room. The girl explains that she just wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with him, and as the Duke's wife and a member of the Marmontel family, Cecile is ready to share his pain. The man asks his wife what kind of pain she is referring to. She approaches the Duke and asks him why he didn't tell her he was infertile. The Duke starts laughing and replies to the girl that he is not infertile at all, and there is no point in talking to her about it. Cecile explains her conjectures by saying that she knows that he had no children in his previous marriage and no children out of wedlock. Aaron indignantly asks his wife what this could mean. Cecile asks her husband to prove to her that he can have children, and if he doesn't want to, there is nothing to be done, and there seems to be no point in their union, and proposes to the Duke for a divorce. The man explains to Cecile that if they divorce, they will have nothing, and asks his wife if she is satisfied with this arrangement, but she replies to the Duke that she has nothing. Some time later, Madame Contra approaches the grieving Duchess and asks if she is all right, and reminds her of the medicine she gave her earlier. Cecile replies that she does not need it, as her husband, Duke Marmontel, is barren, though he does not admit it. Madame Contra asks Cecile if she knows why the Duke married her. The girl answers her that she knows nothing about it and nothing comes to mind. She only knows that he was advised by her Murph to marry the Count's wife. Elizabeth realizes that Cecile does not know the real reason and tells her that she heard that the Duke of Marmontel kneeled before the king to marry her, because at first the king was against their marriage. Cecile learns that the Earl married an impoverished girl and gave up his pride because he wanted her. She is disgusted to realize it, but the Duke loves her and has not sat down to leave her. As Cecile was leaving the Duke's room, he stops her by asking her if she wants his fortune, and asks her spouse if she will stay by his side if he shares it with her. Cecile turns to the Duke, and putting her hand on his chest, tells Arnaud that they are not enemies at all, and asks him to respect her as a person, and then they can become great partners. Pulling Cecile to him by the shoulders, he agrees to these conditions and allows her to do what she wants, but he has only one request. The Duke can no longer tolerate Louis's taunts and asks his wife to keep his infertility a secret. These words meant to Cecile that she would now have to take matters into her own hands. The king and the aristocrats of Versailles await news of the Marmontel heir. This family threatens the king's power, but to them it was nothing more than gossip. People speculate that if there is an heir, there is a possibility that he may have his sights set on the royal throne. And this new rumor about her infertility will amuse them too, even if it's not true. But it doesn't matter because Cecile's already got everything she wants. That night, William has another realistic dream. While Charles is looking out the window, his wife Leah approaches him from behind and wraps her arms around his waist, asking him to stay with her a little longer. Charles turns to the girl. He puts his palms on her face and says that he also wants to stay with her, but he has to go. And kissing Leah on the forehead, he asks her to rest some more. A girl gathering her husband tells him that yesterday she met His Majesty and assumes that he came to the forest to hunt. She was so excited that she made a mistake, but the king graciously forgave her. And it seems the terrible rumors about him are just a fiction, and he is a good man. At that moment, the close form of the king with a sinister smile on his face creeps up to the girl from behind. The man tries to warn his wife of the danger behind her back, but the dream is interrupted and William opens his eyes in fright. When he wakes up and remembers the images, the Count concludes that the king in his dreams is the Duke of Marmontel, and in life and in dreams, the Duchess eludes him. The day before, Count Rohan and Madame Contra were sitting in the greenhouse discussing what was happening to them. The girl shows the graph of the record where it says that these realistic dreams may be a memory from his past life. William calls it all nonsense, as he believes that people go to heaven or hell after they die and not be reborn as humans again. Elizabeth tells the Count that in distant lands, it is believed that if you expand your consciousness, even the simplest thing will seem simple, so you have to let go of your beliefs, and everything will fall into place. These dreams are raccoon memories. Returning to real time. William puts his hand to his forehead and ponders that if these dreams are really his memories from his past life, why he still remembers them. What is the reason? But anyway, it doesn't matter now. Standing at the mirror, he keeps thinking that the Duke will always torment Cécile. Then he couldn't protect her from him, and now he can't watch her unhappy anymore and wants to make her happy with him. In the middle of the night, Madame Contra and the demon Azrael meet on the roof of the mansion. The demon asks Elizabeth if William is seeing memories from his past life. The girl confirms this as they have seen enough of it. Azrael wonders what he should do in such a case. This is very rare, and perhaps someone has deliberately restored his memories. The demon wonders who could have done it besides him, and he comes up with the idea that it was Mephisto, a masked man with a long nose, who did it. The next day, Cécile meets Albert in the hallway of the mansion and asks him why he has been walking alone for the past few days, assuming that Lord Rohan has gone somewhere else. Albert replies to the Duchess that William has not gone anywhere, but has simply befriended Madame Contra and spends most of his time with her. And if he needs him, he can just bring him to Cécile, since William is nearby, so it won't take long. The Duchess refuses the offer and tells the young man that she would rather go looking for him herself. Heading out, Cécile ponders when William and Madame Contra had become friends. She thought they were very different, and they were. Finding the two friends and watching them, Cécile tries to understand what they are discussing and why they are laughing so much. Count Rohan had always seemed to her not to be verbose. Elizabeth, interrupted from her fascinating conversation, turns around and notices the Duchess and tells her that she didn't notice her coming at all. Cécile explains that she was just passing by and asks Elizabeth to help her with the invitations to the ball. Madame Contra agrees to help the Duchess. Cécile glances at Count Rohan and apologizes for interrupting their conversation. William replies to Cécile that there is nothing wrong and asks her if there is anything he can do to help her. The girl notices that although he says that she didn't bother him, he makes a facial expression to the contrary. Taking Madame Contra to the house, Cécile replies to William that it would be better for her to rehearse the dance. William agrees to make every effort to do so in order not to be estranged from her. When she arrives at the mansion, Cécile gives Madame Contra a list of invited guests for the ball. Cécile explains to her that it is difficult to keep up with the news outside Versailles and asks her to tell her all about the ladies on the list, and preferably their weaknesses. Madame Contra is surprised at such a request from the Duchess. Cécile adds that most likely these ladies know about her, or at least have heard some rumors about her, and it would be unfair if she were not aware of them. With a laugh, Elizabeth calls Milady the best. Cécile asks her if she is disappointed in her. Madame Contra replies that she is not disappointed, but quite the opposite, and starts talking about the noble ladies on the guest list, starting with Miss Leclos, after her husband stopped coming to the house raising his sons in the stable. Mrs. Raspina created a secret room in her house to have dates with her lovers in secret from her husband. Mrs. Geiber is also said to be secretly dating her daughter's ex-boyfriend. Elizabeth wants to say something about Mrs. Chatillon, but is interrupted by Cécile, who asks if there is anything else not about their lovers. Madame Contra replies that all these women have married without love, so all the rumors focus on that and instinct can't be deceived. And since the conversation is about it, she suggests that the Duchess should also have a lover. Cécile is surprised by this suggestion and asks Elizabeth if she is joking now. Madame Contra speaks of Lord Rohan and notes that he is enthusiastic. Cécile is going over the dialogue with William in his head. After he said he would practice dancing to keep his distance from her, she explained to him that he needed to practice hard so that all the ladies at the ball would be delighted, not just her. William replied that he only cared about her opinion and was not going to dance with anyone else. Cécile thought that Count Rohan has changed, at least in some way, and asks Madame Contra not to joke so, and after a little thought asks her if she has a favorite person. Elizabeth leaves saying that she has a beloved man, but this love is unrequited. When asked what kind of man he is, she replies that she still doesn't know. At night, Mephisto arrives on the grounds of Cécile's uncle's house, dropping his black robe and mask. The demon appears with black hair and a red and black suit. He's up to something since he's been sitting idle for too long. Jacques sits near the fountain and is angry that his sister dared not to invite him. Although they are one family, he is very angry about the situation and thinks that Cécile is Pepe Barshivka. Mephisto goes to the Duchess's uncle and, standing in front of him with his arms crossed over his chest, asks him if he is angry with his sister. Jacques asks him who he is and what he is doing here. The demon asks him if he wants to get revenge on Cécile for joining up. Jacques isn't sure he does. Mephisto tries to persuade him to take revenge on the Duchess, reminding him that Cécile does not pay attention to his feelings and avoids them in every possible way, and now she does not notice him at all, and leads him to believe that if she's not his, other men will have her. Jacques gets the gist of his speech and cheerfully tells the demon that if she is not his, no other man can have her. Mephisto approaches Jacques from behind and asks him what he needs to do this. The man answers the demon that it is necessary to make sure that no one gets Cécile, and to do so, he must kill her. And leaving the demon satisfied, he repeats several times that he will kill her. Mephisto didn't think it would be so easy to convince Jacques to get rid of his relative and finds him boring. For Mephisto, it will be an easy job. He wonders if Azrael will be able to protect Cécile. Meanwhile, Azrael comes into the Duchess's room and greets her. Cécile asks the demon why he is here and if he is all right now. Azrael is pleased that Cécile was worried about him. He reaches up to touch the girl's face, but she slaps him, reminding him that he didn't answer her earlier question. Cécile pushes the demon away from her by punching him in the chest. Azrael tells her that sometimes he thinks she's too pushy and asks if she'll beat him if he does respond. Cécile replies that she won't. Azrael was pleased with this answer, and with a smile on his face tells her that he will tell her everything while she is changing. He takes a pair of scissors out of his pocket and notes that she can't do it by herself, so he helps her change. Cécile turns around to walk away from Azrael, but he doesn't let her go, squeezing her shoulder and asking her about what she didn't want to hear his story. The demon begins to cut the dress on the sides. Cécile notices that he looks like a pervert and asks him if Mephisto is a devil like him and why he is attacking him. Azrael confirms that the attacker is a demon like him and that he attacked him because they disagreed with Mephisto. And continuing to cut explains that they devils fight just like regular people. Cécile asks Azrael why they quarreled, but the demon doesn't want to answer and says it's a secret, but will tell her if she makes a contract with him. Cécile suggests that they quarreled over her. The devil refutes this and calls her a narcissist. The girl doesn't understand what he wants to do to her then. It looks like he doesn't want her soul so badly after all. Azrael pulls Cécile by the waist and tells her that she doesn't need an answer, and without any words she feels it. But she denies it. The Duchess turns to him and says that it is not normal for the devil to fall in love. Pulling Cécile harder, he tells her that there is nothing to be done, and that he likes her, and asks if she would feel better if she perceived his actions as courting. The girl, angry at Azriel for molesting her, asks him to take his hands off her body and leave. The devil is offended by this rudeness. The next day, strolling through the garden, Cecile, remembering the previous night, thinks about how Azriel is a cunning bastard, and his thoughts are impossible to understand and recognize where the truth and where a blatant lie. She meets Earl Rohan grooming his horse, and after saying hello, she asks him where he is going. William explains to her that he has not ridden for a long time. Cecile envies him as she has not done it for a long time. The man offers her a ride together. Cecile refuses because her doctor has forbidden her to ride a horse. The Count suggests that perhaps he might make it easier for her and puts her on a horse. The girl is startled by this unexpected action. William asks Cecile if she would like to take a walk in the woods. Without waiting for an answer, he asks her to hold on tight. Meanwhile, Albert and Mrs. Contra are walking towards the forest. The young man notices that the road they take into the forest is very good for walking and also quite quiet. Suddenly, he notices two unknown men in the distance, one of whom is holding a gun. Elizabeth suggests that these men have come here to hunt. With a frightened look, Albert stares after the strangers, wondering who they are, since no one can hunt in this territory without the permission of the Duke of Marmontel. As William continues his horseback ride through the woods, he tells Cecile that he has heard that this upcoming ball will be a very important event. Cecile replies that it is important only to the aristocrats of Versailles, but to her, it is more of a bother. But in any case, she'll have to watch him since she and the Duke are married. Count Rohan asks the girl if she regrets their wedding. Cecile asks the Count why he's asking. He replies that her words about her and the Duke being married sounded exactly as if she regretted it. She explains to William that if she hadn't married the Duke of Marmontel, her life would have been even messier, and writes to the Earl about what happened to her family. William realizes that if she had waited a little longer, her relationship with him would have been very different, and replayed her dreams in his head. Cecile mentally asks the Count not to say so, for she cannot give him what he wants. Count Rohan distracts the girl from her thoughts by saying that he wants to steal her. The way he looks at Cecile is somehow very familiar to her. She jumps off her horse and informs William that she is leaving and asks him to stop acting like this, as under no circumstances can she accept his feelings. And if he wants to keep their friendship, he'll have to let go of those unnecessary feelings, and she'll pretend she didn't hear those words. And besides, it's the right thing to do. William notices a man in a beige suit with guns in his hands aiming at Cecile, and grabbing her arm hides her behind him, preventing the bullet from penetrating her body. This man turns out to be Jacques, Cecile's taker. With eyes filled with madness, he shoots her stack of wishes to die as soon as possible. A bullet hits the Count of Rohan in the stomach. The man bleeds to death and falls to the ground. Cecile tries desperately to bring him to his senses. At that moment, Jacques tells his sister that he missed, but this time he will hit the target. Clutching William's body to her, she begs Jacques to stop, because if he kills her, it will be tantamount to murdering a member of the royal family, which means he will lose everything because of her. Continuing to point the loaded gun, Jacques tells Cecile that only her death can quell his anger, and says goodbye to his sister. The girl can't believe that everything is over for her because of this freak. Jacques doesn't have time to shoot as the demon Azriel appears in front of him and lifts him into the air, choking him with his magic to the point where he begins to foam from his mouth. Cecile begs the demon not to kill Jacques. She clutches at his red tailcoat to try to stop his fervor and begs him pitifully not to do it and to listen to her. But Cecile can't stop him. She has completely forgotten the fact that Azriel is still the devil, and that is the real essence that will not allow him to do otherwise. Jacques drops dead to the ground. Cecile brings the early and awake William to the mansion on her shoulders. Madame Contra, Albert, and the Duke of Marmontel, with horror at the whole scene. The Duchess, handing over Count Rohan, orders a servant to escort him to his bedroom and fetch the physician, and turning to Madame Contra, asks her if she can help him until the doctor arrives. Elizabeth agrees to help William and says she will prepare an anesthetic immediately. At that moment, the butler and Albert carry away the Earl of Rohan. The young man pitifully begs his brother to wake up. Cecile is trying to come to her senses after what has happened. Her husband, Duke Marmontel, approaches her. He asks her if she is all right, noticing her bloody dress. Cecile asks her husband not to worry about her, since she is unharmed thanks to Count Rohan. The Duke asks who did it. The girl asks Arnaud to calm down, because if he goes into the woods, he will find the body of the culprit, the body of her uncle Jacques. Calling him a madman, the Duke of Marmontel resents Jacques for daring to enter his territory and harm him. Cecile asks her husband if he believes her. Squeezing her hand, the Duke replies that he has doubts about her words. Cecile told him everything that had happened in the forest that day, but she chose to keep silent about the Earl of Rohan's confession and Azrael's appearance. She felt that lies were necessary for these events. Jacques had indeed come to kill her, but had ended up dying at the hands of people she didn't know. Even though Cecile mumbled outright lies to her husband, he seemed to believe it all. She even doubts that he listened to her words at all, because his attention is focused only on the fact that she survived. Deep in the night, Mephisto strolls alone through the library. At the end of the room on a chair sits Azrael, holding a criminal's gun in his hands, telling the devil that originally, Jacques-Maximilien Bernard was not supposed to die today, as well as to meet Cecile. He asks Mephisto if he's been controlling Cecile's uncle. The devil confirms this and explains his actions by saying that until the girl disappears, he doesn't think he will do anything else but follow her. Azrael gets up from his chair and continues to pistol whip the smoke. Mephisto reminds him that something like that won't kill him. The devil replies to his partner that he knows that a gunshot does not kill them, but they may feel pain. And before shooting Mephisto, he asks him to try to memorize what will happen if he dares to touch Cecile. The Duchess, meanwhile, comes to the room where William is lying wounded. She suggests that Albert, who is sitting by the bed, should go and rest while he stays with the Count. The young man replies that he is fine and does not need to rest. Cecile specifies that she would like to sit with William here, as he has been hurt because of her. Albert agrees to leave the room for a while, and while he eats, asks the Duchess to stay with his brother until then. Cecile walks over to the bed and takes a rag to soak it in water, thinking that she can't understand how anyone can risk their life so easily, even if they have feelings. She doesn't understand why she would go that far. William, after a long sleep, finally opens his eyes, and noticing Cecile sitting next to him, asks her what she is thinking about. When she sees that the Earl of Rohan is awake, she notices that she owes him a debt for the second time. She asks him how he can repay her for her help. William replies that he shouldn't, as he was relieved to see that it was all over and the bullet didn't hit her. Cecile asks the man not to say so because she cannot accept his feelings, even though he saved her life. Count Rohan replies that even after these words, he is not going to give up. Touching the Duchess, William asks if she loves the Duke or if there is someone else. But if there is no such person whom she loves, then asks her to love him in that case. In case he can't love him, he suggests that Cecile use him as soon as she wishes, and taking her palm in his hand, he places it on his chest. Cecile notices how hard her heart is beating, but she does not know if it is hers or his. Standing under the full moon against the mansion, Azrael is thinking about something of his own and waiting for Madame Contra. Hidden beneath her cloak, Elizabeth approaches the devil, signaling that she is there. When Azrael hears her, he thanks her for saving Cecile from Jacques and Mephisto. Elizabeth asks the devil if he will go to the house to see Cecile. After some thought, Azrael replies that he will, but not now. He replayed in his mind the moment after killing Jacques. Without getting up from the ground, Cecile asks loudly for the demon to get as far away from her as possible. Azrael froze at this reaction to his actions. Cecile asks him if he is going to kill the Earl of Rohan. Laying William on the ground, Azrael asks the Duchess not to worry, as he is only going to stop the bleeding. And at the moment while the devil was healing the wounds of Count Rohan, she tells him that he should not have killed her uncle Jacques, as he is a man who would not have had the courage to kill even her. Cecile assumes someone is behind this and needs to find out who. Azrael replies that he doesn't want to lose her again because of something stupid. Cecile clarifies how again. The demon is avoiding the topic, as he doesn't really want to start this conversation. He offers to walk her to the mansion and holds out his hand to her, waiting for some kind of response. Cecile glances at Count Rohan's disconnected body and asks Azrael why he won't save the man. But the demon just stares silently at Cecile without giving any answer. Returning to real time, he comes to realize that Cecile was trying not to show it, but it was obvious that she was very scared because of the shooting. Madame Contra interrupts Azrael's musings, saying that something is bothering her even more. The demon asks if it's about Mephisto's condition and reassures Elizabeth that he didn't kill him, so she shouldn't worry about it. Madame Contra specifies that she is not concerned about that, but that on the day when Jacques shot the Count of Rohan, she saw 2 people, so there was someone else there besides Cecile's uncle. Azrael is interested in this fact because it turns out that there is a witness to this crime. Meanwhile, in the palace, the man who was with Jacques on the day of the murder kneels before King Louis. The king asks him if he has any information he can report to him, and if he does, he asks him to tell him everything in great detail. The upcoming ball was cancelled, and instead a quiet funeral was held for Jacques. Some whisper that the man's entire body was torn to shreds. Others question who did this horror to him. To those present at the funeral, it is obvious that this is the aftermath of the assassination attempt on the Duchess, but one wonders who the culprit is. Cecile looks at Jacques' body lying in the coffin. She finds it strange that she is attending the funeral of the man who made an attempt on her life, and she does not understand where this strange mercy comes from. The Duke of Marmontel stands next to Count Rosanne and asks him if he is all right, as he was too quick on his feet. William replies that he is much better now. The Duke assumes that the reason he has recovered so quickly is that he is still young, and he is jealous of that. Anyway, he is grateful to Count Rohan for saving his wife Cecile, because in this situation he could have lost his life, but still showed courage. William denies that this is courage, and suggests that Duke Marmontel would do the same if he were in such a situation. The Duke confirms it, for what else could it be? And asks William if he misses his home, as he thinks studying abroad is probably not easy, and during his illness the nostalgic feelings become deeper. The Earl of Rohan denies this, saying that life in France suits him far better than he first expected. These words have caused the Duke to gush, as it means that his guests are being properly cared for. At this point, William reflects that the real reason he wants to stay here is because Cecile is here. William recalls their evening conversation when Cecile came to him after he had been wounded. The girl explained to him that she was not a very nice person and could really use it and then just throw it away. She asks William if he is sure he is ready for this. The Count knows that she will be forced to accept his demands and tells her that he will not regret this decision. None of this matters to him. For his failure to protect her in his past life, he will pay for that sin in this life. Cecile approaches Count Rohan and asks him if he is all right. He replies to the Duchess that thanks to her he is indeed all right, and looking at her he thinks that if he could, he would gladly give his life to her. The Duke of Marmontel is watching their dialogue from the sidelines. At that moment, a servant comes up to him and, apologizing for distracting him, informs him that His Majesty King Louis has arrived at his mansion. The king enters the guest room with his cane in his hand and asks the Duke if he is surprised by his unexpected visit. Arnaud replies that he is surprised and asks him how he dared to come here, especially without warning. The king tells the Duke that they have not seen each other for a long time and specifies why he reacts so nervously to it, whether he thinks that he arranged that trouble. Arnaud flares up and wants to be rude to the king, but Cecile stops his outburst of anger. The king tells the Duchess that he knew this would happen, so he came to them. Louis mentions that his cousin has delusions of grandeur, so he thinks he is right about everything. Gritting his teeth in anger, Arnaud turns and leaves the room, closing the door loudly behind him. After the Duke leaves, the king tells Cecile that for Jacques to be torn to shreds and killed is not punishment enough for daring to attack the royal family. Cecile is still not clear why the king has come all the way here, and suggests that perhaps he is behind it all because their marriage to the Duke of Marmontel was undesirable to him. But she dismisses the idea at once, since in that case Louis would have acted more carefully and would probably have killed Arnaud rather than her. For starters, the likelihood of the king being involved seems doubtful unless he has some personal grudge. The king tells the Duchess that Baron Bernard is dead, but he has captured his servant, and in that case Cecile can punish this accomplice as she wishes. The girl was surprised that her uncle had an accomplice. The king adds to his words that he himself went to him that night and confessed everything. Cecile ponders what to do in such a case, because if there was also a servant, the king knows the truth about what happened in the forest. The Duchess replies to the king that she did not know that there was another participant, as she had only seen her Uncle Jacques, and asks Louis if he is sure that there was someone else there. The king says he's not sure about it because it doesn't matter to him. Whether it's about witchcraft or witches, he's not interested in those silly stories he told sitting on his knees. Cecil is growing increasingly curious as to why he is here if not for questioning. The king explains that the reason he is here is because he wants to make a deal with her. Cecile asks him what deal the king can make with her, since she is a Marmontel man. Louis replies to the Duchess that he understands her as he too was almost killed by his cousin. Feeling betrayed, devastated, and angry, the king knows what she has experienced. They have something in common. Cecile answers him that even if she does, she will not change her mind. His words mean that she will be a traitor to her husband and the Marmontel family. The king asks the Duchess only to discreetly observe his cousin Arnaud and report back to him, as it is not so difficult. He tells Cecile that he thinks she can understand the anxiety he is feeling at this time and is sure that she can understand him because his enemy is still alive. It is strange for Cecile that the king calls Arnaud an enemy, but it is only that he does not think only of entertainment. She wants to say something to the king, but he covers her by saying that there is no need to give him an answer right away, as she is already suffering. However, she has no other option but to help him and asks him not to forget that he is the rightful heir to the throne and king of France. Walking through the greenhouse at night, she ponders the meaning of the king's words that she has no other option but to help him. It's strange to her that he thinks she would agree to this deal, and to have his men follow her everywhere is terrible for her. But it's more important for Cecile to decide what to do with the witness, whether to let the king deal with him himself or to get someone else to deal with him. Suddenly, many small stars begin to fall from the sky. Cecile looks at them with interest. This beautiful phenomenon is the work of Azrael. She doesn't turn around and tells him that if he came here, he should have said so. The demon tells her that he was wrong and that he had to deal carefully with Jacques' servant, too. Cecile agrees that he was wrong and that it's up to him to clean up the mess. Azrael apologizes to the girl. She asks what he's apologizing for, but the demon responds with a hint. Cecile asks Azrael not to get involved in her life anymore without even getting her opinion. It's strange for a man to ask her to do such a thing, since she was almost killed the last time. Azrael asks Cecile if he must ask her consent even in the melt moments of danger. She confirms it, which puzzles the demon. He responds by saying that she should have gotten an obedient dog. At that moment, Cecile reaches into his hair and rips the ribbon from his hair, unraveling it. Azrael, not realizing what is happening, asks Cecile what she has just done. The girl picks up the fallen ribbon and, holding it in her hands, tells the demon that she is his mistress, and this thing in her hand will be the proof. Azrael jokingly clutches at his heart at this unexpected turn of events. He notices that Cecile looks tired and tells her so. The Duchess confirms that she is indeed exhausted from the day and asks Azrael to help her sleep well tonight. The demon agrees, calling Cecile his mistress. The next day, in the house where Cecile lived before her marriage, her mother, Madame Mercier, stands in the middle of the room, covering her mouth with her hand. Ander, noticing something amiss, with a box in his hand, approaches his beloved and asks her if everything is all right. The woman replies that she feels a little nauseous. She guesses what is causing this condition, but does not fully believe it. Madame Mercier asks her lover André to call a doctor. The man anxiously asks her what she is suffering from, and after answering, he cannot believe it either. William, his brother Albert, Madame Contra, and Cecile are sitting at a long table set with sweets. They are discussing the recent opera among themselves. Elizabeth says that this is the first time the opera has raised such a topic and advises the others to go if they have not been there yet. She tells a story where a man discovers that his wife's lover is pretending to be a servant. Albert interrupts Madame Conta to say that it would be more fun to see it in person. Cecile's eyes sparkle with interest, and with a smile she asks Elizabeth to tell her a little more about what happened there. Madame Contra suggests that instead of retelling the story, Cecile goes to see the opera together. Albert thinks it's a great idea and offers to take the Duke of Marmontel with him. Cecile replies that she doesn't think the Duke should watch such a thing, suggesting he'd rather go to a drama. William looks at the Duchess and notices that he hasn't seen her smiling in a long time. Albert, sitting across from his brother, noticing the way he looks at Cecile, calls him a lovesick idiot and thinks he is too obvious. The Duke of Marmontel enters the room and, after a short silence, draws attention to himself by saying that they are having fun here. Cecile, seeing her husband, rises from the table. The Duke asks her not to get up, as it seems to him that he has spoiled the atmosphere by his appearance. The Duchess replies that this is not true at all. Arnaud asks Cecile to come to him for a moment. She asks him what's wrong. The Duke tells his wife that he has a meeting in Paris, so he will be back late. Cecile asks Arnaud what this meeting is about, to which he replies that it is better for her not to know. He remembers something else, and taking a letter out of his cloak, gives Cecile a letter from her mother. Taking the letter, the girl asks her husband if he has read it. The Duke confirms this and adds that the content of the letter is not the most cheerful. While Cecile is talking to her husband, William is pacing from side to side. Albert asks his brother to stop pacing and asks what is troubling him. William tells his brother that from the look on the Duchess's face as she reads the letter, something bad has happened, and he is worried about her. Albert reminds his brother that the Duchess's affairs are none of his business and advises him to be more witty in his actions and feelings for Cecile, and if he continues to show them openly, the Duke will realize it too. William replies that he has no intention of discounting his feelings. Albert suggests that he is probably just joking, but the Earl refutes this by saying that he is completely serious, and besides, the Duchess also knows of his feelings for her and does not accept them. William reassures his brother that it will do him no harm in any case, and politely asks him to pretend he knows nothing about it. Albert clenches his hands into fists from anger at his cousin and reflects that he really won't be hurt by this, but if there is such a possibility, he will immediately give up William. After reading the letter, Cecile informs everyone that Madame Mercier is pregnant with André's child. Madame Contra is outraged by this news. She can't understand how she could let this happen knowing her daughter's situation. Elizabeth considers it a foolish act on her part not to notice such a thing, as it is now quite obvious what the nobility will be judging about. Cecile replies that there's nothing to be done. Her mother is pregnant. She can only wish her and Ander nothing but happiness. Madame Contra asks the Duchess why she does not see her mother, because she ruined their family, and because of her, Cecile even had to marry the old Duke, and now this scandal because of her pregnancy. Elizabeth thinks that the Duchess's mother has made a laughingstock of her with her actions, and if this were to happen to her, she would be very angry with her mother. Cecile replies to her that she all really hates her but shouldn't because Madame Mercier was with her to the very end to protect her. The events go back 15 years to the Mercier estate. Little Cecile, with a frightened expression on her face, sits opposite the door to her parents' room and hears her father beating her mother. The young mistress is approached by her nanny who tries to take her away and tells her that she is not allowed to be here. Cecile breaks free and tells the woman that her mother is in a lot of pain and needs help. The girl's nanny tells her that if they don't leave right away, they will both get a beating from the master. At that moment, Cecile's father opens the bedroom door and looks at his daughter and the maid with a haughty look. The woman, frightened of the consequences, apologizes for allowing it and tells the owner that they will leave immediately. But Cecile's father just passes them by, calling them worthless. After the man has left the corridor, little Cecile rushes at full speed to her mother. Madame Mercier sits on the bed with her legs tucked up in her nightdress and covers her battered body parts with it. She is very glad to see her daughter. Cecile asks her mother if she is all right and why her father is hurting her. Madame Mercier embraces her daughter and explains her husband's actions by saying that he does it out of love for her and asks her not to worry as she is not hurt at all. Cecile realized this was an outright lie even as a child. She suggests that perhaps deep down, her mother may have run away from her father's violence many times, convincing herself that all is not as it seems. But until the very end, she continued to endure this attitude over and over again. Her mother understood perfectly well. If she ran away, her husband's cruelty would fall on Cécile. So even though she hated her, she would not condemn her. Not wanting to leave the gloomy atmosphere, Madame Mercier notices that their mood has soured and suggests that Cécile fix it immediately. The Duchess asks Elizabeth how she wants to do it. Madame Mercier reminds Cécile of the ball that was cancelled because of the funeral, and she is very sorry for what happened. She tells Cécile that there will be a masquerade ball in Paris this week and suggests that they all go together. After all, if the Duchess wears a mask, no one will recognize her. Walking through the mansion at night, Cécile reflects on the fact that she suddenly saw something she couldn't see until now. Looking back into the past, she was able to see the present. Facing death, her whole life up to that point flashed in front of her, and then Cécile wondered if she had ever been truly happy and blissful. And now, she doesn't even have an answer to such a simple question. Behind her, the demon Azrael reappears and offers to change the question. Will she be happy in the future? Maybe even with him, and points to herself with a smug smile. Cécile rests her head against Azrael's chest and tells him that life has been so unfair to her all this time, and hugging the demon tighter, she adds that from now on, she will truly live her life as her heart tells her to, and as she wishes. The demon lies on the bed with the sleeping Cécile and puts his arm around her shoulders. In the middle of the night, the girl opens her eyes and stares at Azrael and tells him that she is still thinking about whether she should give birth to an heir for the Duke, and if it happens, it seems that she will be able to influence the situation. As Azrael sits up, he asks Cécile how she wants to do it if the Duke is still infertile. The girl doesn't answer anything and continues to stare at the demon. Azrael asks Cécile if she is serious about it and in that case offers to sign a contract with him, but the girl categorically does not want to do it. The demon leaning on the headboard asks Cécile why she always chooses the hard way if there is an easy way and whether she wants to go to heaven so much. The girl confirms that she really wants to go to paradise after death. Azrael explains to her that there's nothing special there, and flipping his body over hers offers her a taste of paradise right here and now. Plus, you don't have to be in a relationship to have a baby. Cécile pushes the demon away and covers her body with her hands, telling him that she is not only interested in having children. Azrael asks the girl if she will use the Count of Rohan in that case. The day of the ball in Paris arrives. Albert, his brother Count Rozan, and Madame de la Chambre are in the lobby of the mansion dressed in costume. Elizabeth admires the Count's image and says that he looks good in a tailcoat with a fur collar and an eye patch covering one eye. William tells Madame Contra that he thinks this image is too pretentious. The girl replies that for a masquerade ball, it is just right. Elizabeth herself is wearing a black dress decorated with heart-shaped elements. To see them off to a ball in Paris, the Duke of Marmontel comes out. He wishes to have a good time in his stead and asks you to take care of his wife. Albert tells the Duke that it would be nice if he joined them. Arnaud tells him that old men like him have a hard time with dance parties. Madame Contra asks the Duke of Marmontel to entrust the Duchess to her, as she will be able to cheer her up and bring her back safe and sound. The Duke agrees and tells Elizabeth that he can only trust her if it is her. After a while, Cécile comes out to the others dressed in a man's suit consisting of a blue cape, a jacket with golden grebes and white pants. Madame Contra is delighted with the image of the Duchess. Cécile asks if they have been waiting for her for a long time and suggests that they should go quickly, as otherwise they may be late for the ball. Everyone continues to praise the girl's appearance, saying that it suits her very well and that she is very cool. Cécile thanks them for their compliments. At that moment, a servant comes up and informs her that the carriage has already arrived. Madame Conga asks Mr. Albert, who is lagging behind, to hurry up. The young man runs for the exit and asks Elizabeth to go slower. Cécile takes the Earl of Rohan under her arm and tells her husband that perhaps they will be back by dawn, so he may not wait for them and go to bed. The Duchess asks William if he is ready to go to the ball, to which he replies they can go. The Duke of Marmontel watches Count Rozan and Cécile leave, clenching his hand into a fist with anger and jealousy boiling inside. Arriving at the ball in Cécile reflects that she had participated in the Versailles masquerade balls several times, but attending such an event in Paris was new to her. Everyone here is so liberated and observes formalities, not hiding interest and their passionate desires. The nobles dressed in colorful masks drink and indulge in debauchery. Cécile is not sure whether it was the influence of the atmosphere or the promises of the past, but she also wanted to break into the crowd. Grabbing William's hand, she offers him a dance, and the Count agrees. As they waltz, Cécile asks Count Rohan how long he has liked her. William is confused by this question, and the girl notices it. The Count tells her that he fell in love with her at first sight. Cécile asks him how this is even possible. William explains to her that when they first met, he felt as if he had known her for a long time. At this time, the Duke of Marmontel is sitting in his study, remembering the moment when Cécile went with Count Rohan to the ball, and in a fit of emotion, he slaps his palm on the table. Arnaud calls up a servant named Antoine and asks him to prepare a carnival mask for him, as he too has decided to go to a masquerade ball in Paris. Cécile and William are sitting on the sofa and talking about something while the other guests of the ball are dancing. Madame Contra observes them and notices that they do not move a step away from each other. The devil Mephisto appears next to Elizabeth and tells her that the two seem to be having quite a good time. Madame Contra asks the devil why he is here and warns him that if he wants to harm Cécile, she will not just stand by. Mephisto tells her that he hasn't even thought about it, but that William and Cécile look good together. Elizabeth confirms that they do, telling the devil that she wants to experience such love too. Mephisto explains to Elizabeth that it's best not to mix the world of ordinary people with their world. But Azrael constantly seeks to destroy this boundary, and they must not silently let it happen. And if there's no way to eliminate the cause, it's worth forcing the girl to give up Azrael, and ask Elizabeth if she thinks that would be a better option. Madame Contra notes that Mr. Mephisto never understood what Mr. Azrael is, and tells that he has been waiting for this girl for tens of thousands of years, not even knowing when this girl will be born again and will not give up. After listening to Elizabeth, Mr. Mephisto, pointing to Cécile and Count Rohan, asks her if she is satisfied with the fact that the two are linked. Madame Contra asks the devil if her opinion is important to him. Mephisto confirms that her opinion is important to him and disappears without a trace. The Duke of Marmontel has arrived in Paris. Entering the ballroom, he hears a rather familiar voice in the distance. This person turns out to be his mistress Veronica, whom he evicted from his mansion before the wedding. The woman talks to the two men and asks them to wait a bit to prove something. Veronica recognizes the Duke of Marmontel in the crowd and approaches him to say hello. She asks Arnaud if he has come here with his wife. The Duke decides to lie to his mistress, saying that he has come here with his wife. Veronica notices that Arnaud has never liked to attend masquerades, but now he has come for some reason. The Duke changes the subject and asks his mistress when she returned to Paris. Veronica answers him that she arrived here not so long ago and missed this city very much, and also wanted to see it very much. She begins to ask the Duke if he is happy to have this girl in his arms, if it was worth all his efforts. The Duke is not satisfied with such questions about his wife, and reminds Veronica that he has not seen her for a long time, and wonders why he can't talk about something else. Arnaud asks his mistress where she is staying. Veronica answers the Duke that she is staying at a place in the Marais district, and taking Arnaud's hand, tells him that she has so much to tell him, so if it is all right with her, she offers to go to her room. At that moment, Cécile arrives on the set with Count Rohan, and noticing the Duke and his mistress, asks him what he is doing here, as he told them he would stay at home. A smug grin appears on Veronica's face after she realizes that the Duke lied to her and actually came to the masquerade in the taiga about his wife. She greets the Duchess and, bowing, asks if she remembers her. Cécile ignores Veronica and again asks her husband why he has come to the ball. The Duke's mistress realizes that she is nothing to the Duchess. Meanwhile, Arnaud does not answer anything, thinking that he should ignore these interrogations, and he does not understand why he is so agitated. Just as he has a lover, Veronica, Cécile may have a lover, but a lover is just a lover. And it doesn't matter because she's his wife and therefore property. Besides, The Duke thinks Cecile isn't stupid enough to give up everything in favor of love. Arnaud informs his wife that he will return home tonight, so she may not wait for him as she can't refuse the invitation of his old friend Geoffrey. Veronique, standing next to the Duke, keeps smirking, knowing that she has stolen her husband from Cecile for one night. And in this case, with the permission of Cecile, Count of Rohan, the Duke and his mistress leave and wish his wife to have a good time. Aaron leaves thinking that if he doesn't let Cecile go, she will be his forever, but now he just turns a blind eye to her adventures, so he lets her have fun while he still can. The Duchess comes to Elizabeth and says that she wants to go back because someone has ruined her mood, and since Arnaud is not coming back tonight, she can have fun at home. Back at the mansion, Cecile, holding a glass of wine in her hands, muses that Duke Marmontel's behavior is ridiculous because he followed her to the masquerade without saying anything and spoiled everyone's mood by openly exposing himself as a cheater. Count Rohan and Madame Contra ask Chil how she can be so sure that he left to cheat on her. She reminds Wilhelm of how the woman Joffrey smiled wryly and he saw it. Cecile drinks wine glass after glass. Elizabeth notices this and tells the Duchess that she has already had a decent drink and that this glass is unnecessary. The Duchess denies this and tells Wilma and Elizabeth that she will drink all night and offers to have another drink. Count Roseau stands up from the sofa and tells Cecile that she cannot stand on her feet and asks the Duchess to stop drinking. She jabs her finger at William's chest and tells him not to order her around and she doesn't want to stop drinking. William reminds Cecile that alcohol is bad for her health, so she thinks she has had enough wine for the day. The Count tries to take the glass from the Duchess, but he fails and the girl falls to the floor. William asks Cecile if she is all right. Madame Contra asks Cecile not to move until she brings the compress. A man asks the Duchess if she can get to her feet. She replies that she is fine and not hurt at all. William lifts Cecile in his arms and tells her that he will walk her to her room. When Madame Contra arrives at the Duchess's chambers, she examines Cecile's leg and is relieved to hear that she has only twisted her ankle, so she has had enough to drink for the day and should go to bed. She asks the Duchess not to sulk about it, since she herself fell and hurt herself. She then informs him that she is the first to go to bed, and assuming that Count Rohan must be tired too, advises him to go to bed soon. William replies to Madame Contra that he will do so and wishes her good night. Cecile apologizes to the Count for seeing her ugly behavior and thinking it terrible. William sits down on the edge of the bed and tells Cecile that he thinks it is unfortunate because he thinks that Cecile is not the right person to treat like that. Even if the Duke possesses her, he is not at all grateful. Cecile smiles when she hears these words from the Count. William asks the Duchess if she would be happy if she married him, and thinks that she would clearly be better off than with the Duke of Marmontel. The girl is not clear why he behaves this way, as he knows perfectly well that their end is determined, and can't believe that she keeps pulling out these feelings, only it will make it hard for her. William gets out of bed and apologizes to Cecile and decides to go to bed, wishing he had a good night's rest. The girl still does not understand why she feels as if she knows him, but she has definitely seen that look before. And wanting to touch him to find out where this feeling of déjà vu came from, she grabs his hand and sits him back on his bed, wanting to kiss him and moves closer to his lips. But she fails to do so as the image of Azriel lying on top of her appears in her mind. Cecile pushes Earl Rohan away, apologizing for the act, justifying it by saying that she had too much to drink. The man leaves the room telling her everything is fine and wishing her a good night's rest. Turning on her side, Cecile tries to figure out why the moment she wanted to kiss Count Roche, she was reminded of the demon Azriel. At that moment, someone tells Cecile that he thought he didn't need to interfere, but it seems he didn't. The girl flinches in surprise and rises abruptly. In her room, the demon Mephisto stands against the bed, and when Cecile asks who he is, he replies that he is Azrael's colleague and gives his name. Cecile asks Mephisto where Azrael is. He asks her not to be nervous, as he has not come to harm her. Cecile asks Mephisto where Azrael is. The demon tells her that her acquaintance is not coming today, as he is busy with his work right now. Mephisto approaches Cecile, holding out his hand, but she pulls away, demanding that the demon stay away from her. He explains to the girl that if she sits still, they will both be much less tired. Cecile, with fear in her eyes, asks the demon what he is going to do to her. Mephisto asks the Duchess if she remembers anything about her past life. At that moment, his finger flashed with a blue light. Cecile realizes that her body is not moving. Mephisto whispers in her ear that the doubts she has will now be dispelled. Dimon warns the girl that in this, my head will start to hurt a little, because memories from her past life will start to gradually come to life. Cecile is surrounded by total darkness. She doesn't know where she is as it's completely dark and she can't see anything and doesn't know where to go. She calls Azrael, but no one answers her. In the distance, she sees a passage with light coming out of it. Cecile is determined to go there as she believes that it is better to try and go there than to stand in total darkness. As she walks through the passage, she sees a white mansion with a green roof in front of her. This house is very familiar to her, but she can't remember where she saw it. There is the sound of tree leaves rustling in the wind all around. Cecile looks down at her hands and notices how her body is crumbling into many small white petals. After that, she finds herself in bed with her husband from her past life, Charles, who in her present life is Count Rohan. When she opens her eyes, she sees her husband still asleep and notices that he was tired yesterday, as he usually wakes up earlier than she does. The memories are transported back to the day Charles asked for permission to marry Leah. Her father, standing in front of the Baron, tells her that his daughter has been in poor health since childhood and that it will be difficult for her to bear a child. Even a normal life in the palace will not be easy for her. Charles replies to the man that he doesn't care about it and he just wants to live with Leah for the rest of his life, and if she wants to, he would like to have a wedding and asks the girl what she thinks about it. La could not believe it at first, but now she knows that he loves her sincerely. Charles wakes up and asks his wife when she woke up. The girl advises him to sleep a little longer if he is tired, as she sees nothing wrong with a little rest. Laying his head on his wife's shoulder, Charles tells her that he does not want to sleep anymore, as he is already awake. Leah then asks her husband to open his eyes and talk to her. Charles kisses the girl on the cheek, claiming that he is indeed awake. La is embarrassed by this action and clutches her flushed cheek. She rests her head on her spouse's shoulder and thinks about how she could do anything for this man and wants to give him as much as he has given for this endless love. 3 men, including Baron Charles, are discussing business with the peers. One of them informs the Baron that the commanders-in-chief are going to the palace. The other adds that more taxes are being collected from the people, and if Charles does not go to the palace now, things will only get worse. He explains that it is difficult for him now because the palace is not a good environment for his wife Leia, but if His Majesty calls, he will go there alone. His wife overhears the men talking in the doorway. One of the men says that when he arrived, the air was very clean and the place was quiet, and even so, there is no greed in the Baron. The others make such a fuss to see the king. Leia is distracted from listening to the men's conversation by a servant, and informs her mistress that His Majesty has been injured while hunting in the nearby forest. Upon hearing this terrible news, Leia and Charles speed off to where the king is. When they get there, they see His Majesty's right leg being plastered on by a doctor. The king looks up and tells Baron Zarzan that they have not seen him for a long time. In real life, the king is the Duke of Marmontel and Cecile's husband. Leah takes the wounded king to the spare room and hopes that he will rest in peace, even though it is not as comfortable as the palace. The king thanks Baroness Leia for her care and smilingly tells her that now that he has seen her again, it seems to him that the illness is gradually receding. The girl replies to the king that fortunately this is the case, and in that case she will go to her room. The king asks Leah to wait and not to leave. They ask the girl why he avoids visiting the palace, as if she goes there, he will do a lot of things for her. Baron Zarzan enters the room and explains to the king that his wife has a weak body, so life in the palace is not for her. His Majesty replies to Charles that he didn't know that and almost asked too much. He explains that he wanted to invite them both to thank them for their help and that he is sorry they will not be able to visit the palace. Leah realizes that the king must not be disappointed and turns her head to Charles and tells her husband that if the king has invited them, it will be difficult to refuse. Her husband wants to contradict her, but she does not allow it here, and interrupting thanking His Majesty that thanks to him, she will be able to see the palace. The king sparkled with happiness that Leah agreed to visit the palace and asks the Baroness to come. Before going to sleep, Baron Zarzan speculates on why the king decided to come to this remote village to hunt, and why it seems a strange decision to come here just for that. A man from the council asks Baron Zarzan about the king's visit and whether he has any thoughts on it. Charles tells them he doesn't know the reason. The second interrupts him doing something to tell him. The first man with gray hair and a thin mustache on his face asks the brunette what he knows. He tells the Baron and the gray-haired man that he has heard rumors that the king has recently rejected all the women in the palace, showing great interest in only one lady. Crossing his arms on his chest, the first man asks the brunette how this is relevant. He replies that the girl in whom the king is interested is Baroness Zarzan. Charles thinks he knew it. La asks her worried husband before going to bed if he is well. Charles asks her why she accepted the king's invitation to come to the palace. Leah explains that she is worried about him, so she did it because of him, because there is nothing good in refusing a narcissistic king, and reminds him of how her uncle's hatred for him ended. When war broke out, the king sent him to the most dangerous point of battle, and after a while her uncle died. Leah is afraid of losing Charles and understands why he felt anxious and puts her hands on his chest and asks him not to make stupid decisions because of it, especially since she is not so weak and is much healthier than before. She puts her head on his and again asks him not to worry as she is his wife and loves only him. Charles grabs Leah's hands and pulling her to his lips to kiss her, asks her to repeat the words that she loves him. Meanwhile, the king is in his room getting off the bed, removing all the beaters from his body, with the thoughts that now there is no need to pretend to be a sick man for Leia's attention. While Cecile is immersed in a dream where she sees her past life, Mephisto is watching her, standing by her bed. Azrael arrives in the room and sees his colleague and asks him what it all means, and reminds him that he warned him what would happen if he touched Cecile again. Pointing his hand at the girl's body, Mephisto tells Azrael to stand still if he doesn't want to lose her right now, and asks him not to worry about Cecile, as he only triggered memories of her past life. Azrael asks Mephisto why he made this decision on his own. The demon answers him that it was not in his interest to do so, but it was God's will that an heir to the Marmontel family should be born. But the Duke is not capable of it, so they have no choice but to use someone else. Azrael tells his colleague that this is a matter Cecile should have decided for herself. Mephisto calls this foolishness, reminding him that all people are nothing but a gift from God, and their desires are not important. But knowing this, Azrael promises her freedom, which is nothing but deceit, and leaves asking him not to forget where they belong. Leia and Baron Zarzan arrive at the royal palace. The king takes them to the room he has given them for the duration of their visit. Charles bows and thanks His Majesty for his concern. The king turns to the Baroness and tells her that he hopes she will have a good time here. Leah also thanks the king for his concern. In the evening, the king threw a reception in honor of their arrival. Leah admires how many people are there. Charles asks if it bothers her that there are so many people here. The girl replies to her husband that everything is fine and that she likes the life here. A servant comes to Baron Zarzan and tells him that the Duke of Burgundy is looking for him. Before leaving, Charles asks his wife to stay where she is because he will be back soon. Leah asks the Baron not to worry and lets him go. After her husband has left the Baroness, the king approaches her and offers her his hand to dance with her. But Leah refuses, telling him that she is not very good at dancing. The king replies that he will guide her so that everything will work out. The Baroness still agrees to dance with him and drops her hand in return. While dancing, the king asks Leah how she likes life in the palace and whether she wants to stay here. The girl answers the man that thanks to him she is having a great time, but still misses home. The king is not satisfied with this answer and tells Leah that he invited them to the palace to thank them, but it seems that the Baroness did not like it. The girl denies it, saying that it is not what he thought. The king asks Leah to accept a gift and takes a note out of his pocket. He offers to use this gift when help is needed, and if he comes to the place indicated in the note by the right time, he will fulfill any of her requests. The Baroness asks the king how she can accept such a thing. The man asks her to refuse, as it is his thanks for her help, but only she should know about this gift. The girl accepts the note and thanks the king. The next day, Leah goes into the room and sees Charles sitting on the cross, thinking about something and looking very worried. She asks her husband what has happened. The Baron gets up from his chair and hugs Leah and tells her that he is going to war. The girl, worried about her husband, asks him when and where he is going and why he decided to go so suddenly. Charles mentally replies to his wife that this is not sudden at all. Everything has been planned long ago since the king fell in love with her. He wants him to disappear, because only in this way he will be able to possess Leah. The Baron asks his wife not to worry, as he will do everything to survive and return to her. Leah clings to her husband and realizes that she can't let him go like this, and remembers the note the king gave her and decides to ask him not to send Charles to the front. Late at night, Leah arrives at the place indicated in the note and greets His Majesty. The king sees the Baroness and asks her to come closer. He asks her why she has such a sad expression on her face and what has happened to her. Leah tells the king that she has learned that her husband, Baron Zarzin, is going to the front, and she is worried about it. The man standing with his back to the Baroness assures the lady that Baron Zarzin is a capable officer, and therefore she need not worry too much about him. Leah reminds the king that he promised to help her and asked her to move her husband to the rear, and gave if it seems selfish to him she does not care at all, because if Charles dies, she too will lose the meaning of life. The Baroness continues to beg His Majesty to save her husband. The king calls it a difficult request, and taking Leah's face in his hand, he asks her what she thinks he will get in return. The Baroness tells him that if he agrees, he will save 2 people. The king makes his demand. He will save Charles and move him to the rear in case Leah spends one night with him. The girl is outraged by such a request from His Majesty, as she considers it a betrayal of her husband. The man explains his demand by the fact that he liked the Baroness at first sight. He felt it literally at the moment when he met Leah, and if angels existed, they would have her appearance, and considers her far away from the palace where the hidden struggle reigns conspiracies and dirt, such a pure and pure girl. Having finished pondering her identity, the king tells the Baroness that if she agrees to his proposal, that for the Baron will be Zarzin, he guarantees safety. Despite the fact that Leah has already become the wife of another man, the king wants to get her even by such methods. As he leaves, the king tells the girl that she doesn't have to make a decision right now and can think it over. At this point, he reflects that this purity of Leah's soul, which he cannot possess, must be very fun to tarnish. Back in her room, Leah closes the door with a bang and takes off her black cloak. Charles approaches his wife, noticing her sad expression, and asks her what has happened. The Baroness asks her husband to hold her tightly and not to think about anything. Charles prays before her on his knees and tells her not to worry about him, as he will surely return from the war alive. La starts to cry and throws herself into her husband's arms. Charles strokes her head and tells her that everything will be all right. The Baroness ponders whether it would be right to betray him to save him, but she can't imagine the world without him and decides that if she can save him, even if God condemns him and Charles returns from her, she won't care because she will save his life. The next day, the king summons Baron Zarzin to his room as he has something to say to him. That night, Leah decides to spend the night with His Majesty and comes willingly to his rooms thinking that everything will be fine. After talking to the king, Charles can't believe he keeps thinking about it. He wonders what could have influenced the king's decision, since he himself had first ordered him to go to war. The Baron assumed that he simply treasures him, but then dismissed the thought as he wants to get rid of him more than anything else. In any case, he needs to be careful as there is no telling what the king is up to. At this time, Leah is discussing something with her acquaintance with interest. The king watches the girl from the side and reflects that he thought that for one night spent with her, everything will change and he will be all right. But His Majesty, on the contrary, becomes greedy, and as expected, he needs that Leah was targeted and fully in his possession. His subordinate comes to the king with a report, saying that everything he has asked for is ready. The king answers him that there should be no mistakes and asks him to take care of it properly. The man bows and asks that the matter be left to him. As he continues to look out the window, the king reflects that Baron Zarzan has nothing to worry about, as he will sacrifice himself for his country in the war and die a worthy soldier, and his widowed wife will be happy to live with him. Sile watches the past life happen and tells herself that she just can't do it. Leah says goodbye to Charles and asks him not to leave because if he does, she will die. Sile screams at the man that she can't let him go. Azriel, watching the Duchess stirring in bed from memories, comes to the conclusion that Leia is too much in love and he needs to calm Cecile. He grabs the girl's head to wake her up and asks if she can hear him. The girl stops coming back, and the demon is relieved to explain to her that it is the past that has already gone, and it does not belong to her. It is Cecile's reality. She gradually calms down, rekindling her tense hands. Azriel is glad that Cecile has calmed down and tells her that these memories are enough and why she should not go back. The king's subordinate reports that everything is done. His Majesty asks if he is sure, as no one must know the truth about what he has done. The man asks the king not to worry, as he is quite sure. Leia comes into the king's room and asks his Majesty her name. The man tells the Baroness that he is sorry to break the news to her, but Baron Zarzan was attacked on the road and is said to have died on the spot. Leah's heart races when she hears of her husband's death. The king explains to her that it is his fault, as he promised to protect the Baron but failed to do so, and he cannot believe it. The Baroness tearfully replies that she doesn't believe it is true either. The king demonstratively falls to his knees to show how sorry he is. With his head down, he tells Leia that he has hurt her because of his incompetence, and yet he dares to apologize to her, and if he forgives her, he will take care of her for the rest of his life. Without stopping to shed tears, the girl wonders whether the king is not lying to her, and whether her husband Charles is really no longer in this world. Meanwhile, the Baron defends himself from the people falling on him and kills many of them, falls on his knees, and with a bloody face and a sword in his hand, thinks about the fact that he promised his wife to protect her and said that he would return to her. But it looks like he will not succeed, and in this case, he does not know what to do. From behind, a wounded man with a dagger in his hand sneaks up to the Baron, wanting to kill him, but Charles skillfully dodges and kills him with his sword. He can't stop thinking about Leah, but he gradually forgets her face and misses her very much. A shot rings out and Charles falls on his back. A man with long blonde hair stands over the Baron, pointing a 7-round cannon at him. Leah, unable to bear such heavy news, faints, but the king manages to catch her before she falls headlong onto the tiles. As he admires her, the king reflects that she always looks like she's in danger, so he has to be on guard against contacting them. And though it will take a long time, she's his now. 2 days have passed since the king informed Leah of the Baron's death. One of the court women sits by the Baroness's bedside and tells her that she fears they may lose her since she has not eaten in days. The Baroness replies without turning around that she is fine and just wants to be alone. The woman takes the hint and leaves, asking to be called if she needs anything. Left all alone, Cecile thinks that until she sees her husband's body, she doesn't think she can believe that he is dead. Suddenly, someone starts knocking on the door and drops a note. Leah picks it up off the floor, thinking about who wrote it. When she opens it and reads it, she covers her mouth with her hand and can't believe what it says. A lady of the court reports to the king that the Baroness is not eating anything. His Majesty is hurt by this and asks the woman to keep an eye on his beloved. He knew it would be no easy task to take Leia for himself, but he had no idea it would be so bad. Following the court lady, the king's subordinate enters the room and informs him of the trouble. The bodies of the dead have just arrived, but the body of the Baron and Zarzan is not among them. The king jumps up from the sofa and with fury in his eyes asks the man if he is sure of it, because earlier he had told him that Charles was dead. He replies to his Majesty that when they checked the bodies, the Baron was definitely dead, but does not know how. The king orders to find him immediately, as if they cannot find his body, he will die for his mistake. His Majesty cannot believe this, as he was sure that Charles was dead. Leia leaves the house in the middle of the night in search of her husband, wearing a black cloak. Her actions are followed by a court lady hidden behind long bushes. She wonders where the Baroness is going at such a late hour and decides that she should not be slow in reporting it to the king. Meanwhile, Leia comes to the forest, wandering through it, thinking about the stranger who sent her a note. She wonders what he meant by writing that her husband Charles is still alive and who he is. But whether it is a joke or reality, she hopes that her husband is really alive and well. Suddenly, Charles comes out of nowhere. Leia turns around at the voice and, not believing what she sees in front of her, asks if it is really him. The Baron replies that he has returned and is now with her. Charles takes his wife's hands and tells her that he needs to get out of here as soon as possible. Leia asks him what he means and why he is leaving so suddenly. The man replies that the king wanted to kill him, and if he finds out that he is alive, she will be in trouble too. Leia can't believe that His Majesty wanted to kill her husband, because it turns out that he lied to her and she didn't know about it. The king and his henchmen appear behind Charles and call out to him, distracting him from his conversation with his wife. His Majesty tells the Baron that he trusted him and entrusted him with his army, but he disregarded his orders and deserted, and angrily clenches his teeth and tells him that his patience is running out. Baron Zarzan tells him that although he tried to kill him to get his wife, he failed. The king confirms that he has failed, but Charles has failed twice and orders his men to arrest the Baron. Leia shouts to the king not to do this and rushes to His Majesty's feet and begs him to take pity on her husband Charles. The king callously replies to the Baroness that he is sorry, but it is a principle he must honor. A deserter who disobeys his orders must not be slowly killed. Memories of her past life are interrupted, and Cecile jumps up screaming the word no in horror and begins to choke a little. Azriel notices that the Duchess is finally awake and tells her how much he has missed her. Azriel sits down on the bed next to Cecile with her head tucked into her lap and asks her if she has finally calmed down. The Duchess asks the demon if what she saw in the dream was real. Azriel confirms it and says that all this really happened in her past life. Cecile realizes that even in her past life, she suffered from Arnaud. Without knowing it, she married him in this life and thinks about how stupid she had to be to do it. Azriel grabs Cecile's hand and explains to her that her past life has nothing to do with reality and asks her to try to focus on the present. The Duchess agrees that she should do as he tells her and gets out of bed to add that she thinks it is unfair that she is the only one who suffers in this life. She raises her head proudly and tells him that she is going to make him suffer with her and is going to get revenge on Duke Marmontel. She approaches Azriel and puts her hands around his face, telling him that this means he has to help her and asking if he is willing to help her. A few days later, the Duke of Marmontel asks his servant if Cecile will leave her room today, and with a chuckle, he wonders what his wife might be doing there all day and whether she might have decided to stage some sort of protest by accident. Madame Contra suggests that perhaps Madame Cecile is simply not well and suggests that she go up to the Duchess and check on her to see if she is all right. The Duke replies that this is not necessary. At that moment, William gets up and heads towards the exit of the room. His cousin Albert tries to stop him but fails. Observing the behavior of the Earl of Rohan, the Duke asks Albert if they have decided when they will return to England. The young man replies to the Duke that he and his brother have not decided yet, as thanks to him they are having a wonderful time here. The Duke of Marmontel replies that he doesn't doubt it, but why don't they look for a new place to stay, especially since if they stay in Paris, they will find more places to entertain themselves. Albert is a little offended by the proposal, but he agrees with the Duke without showing any sign of it. Madame Contra is outraged that Arnaud is kicking them out. Meanwhile, William has already gone up to Cecile's room and decides to knock on the door, hoping that she is all right since it has been a few days since they last saw each other, and he misses her terribly. Cecile decides to leave the room and meets her husband Arnaud. The Duke of Marmontel notices that they have not seen her for a long time and smilingly asks her if she still resents him because of the incident at the ball in Paris. But he sees no reason to be offended as he has been attentive to her. And calling Cecile his love, he adds to his words that he and she are of the same blood. Confirming this, Cecile explains to the Duke that she sees no reason to keep the marriage alive and therefore they must divorce. Arnaud is upset by her words and asks his wife if she is not joking. Cécile answers him that she is not joking at all and explains her decision by the fact that she will not be able to fulfill the conditions he put forward to her when she married him and therefore demands a divorce from him. Duke Marmontel asks his wife what the real reason is if her lover Count Rohan has asked her to run away from him and does not ask her if she wants to accidentally leave him and marry the Count. Arnaud clenches his hands into a fist from excessive anger and tells Cécile that the divorce will not happen and he will never let her leave him. The girl notices that Arnaud hasn't changed a bit, and this time he's going to ruin her life as well. Cécile asks her husband if he's sure he won't regret it, and she wonders how much patience he has. And as she leaves him, she comes to realize that this time she will beat him to the punch by ruining his life in return. The Duchess returns to her room. Azriel asks her what she's planning to do, since it seems she asked for his help, and asks her what he needs to know. Putting some note on the table, she replies to the demon Azrael that he doesn't need to know anything, and just let him do what she asks him to do. The demon pulls Cécile to him by the shoulders and reminds her that he's helping her without even making a contract, and that's a violation of the rules. Cécile tells Azrael that he told her he loves her, and if that's true, he would do anything for her. And at that moment, sitting on the bed, she lifts up her dress, revealing stockings with ribbons removed from his hair, and adds to his words that Azrael can have whatever he wants when this is all over. The demon tells Cécile that she better not deceive him, to which the girl replies that he is deceiving him since she has no need to lie to him. Azrael, overjoyed at this news, lays his head on Cécile's lap and asks her not to hide anything from him, as he is the only one who can really understand her. Count Rohan is sitting alone in his room on an armchair reading a book. At that moment, he hears someone knocking on his door, and without taking his eyes off the book, asks who it is. Cécile answers him and asks the Count if she can distract him for a while. William approaches the Duchess. She apologizes for distracting him, but she needs to bring a little clarity to their relationship. She was terribly angry with her husband that night and only wanted to kiss him because she was so drunk. She knows that Count Rohan has feelings for her, so she apologizes to him for confusing him that night and promises that it won't happen again. Cécile asks William to put these unnecessary feelings aside and find a worthy mate, as she doesn't want him to waste his time with her. And often, speaking for her, these feelings are quite burdensome. Count Rohan notices that Cécile did not even look at him once while she was saying such cruel words, and putting his palms around her face asks her to repeat what she had said earlier, but looking into his eyes. Looking at William, Cécile realizes that those eyes he has on her, that suffocating sense of déjà vu, there was a reason for it. And then it turns out that William's kindness is not meant for her, but for Leah. She believes that he should not ruin his life in any case, and hopes that the Earl of Rohan will be happy in this life. William tells Cécile that he has heard rumors that she plans to stay for a while at Countess Contra's mansion in Paris. The girl asks the Count why he is telling her this. William asks her to let him follow her to Paris. Cécile reminds the Count that she has already said everything about his love for her. Count Rohan says that he will go with her to Madame Contra's mansion as a friend, and no more, and asks to be allowed to be with her during the trip. Cécile agrees and tells the Count to do as he sees fit. The next day, the white carriage for the trip to Paris was ready. Madame Contra comes up to the Duke of Marmontel and bows to him and tells him that she is going to cheer up the Duchess so he has nothing to worry about. The Duke asks Madame Contra to take good care of his wife. At that moment, Cécile defiantly walks past her husband with her head held high and proud. As she gets into the carriage, she tells the Duke of Marmontel that she will be back soon. The Duke, at this point, turns to the nearby Earl Rohan and, placing his hand on his shoulder, asks him to take care of his wife instead, while he is not by her side. William removes the Duke's hand from his shoulder and tells him that there is nothing to worry about, as he will take proper care of the Duchess. Cécile originally had a definite purpose for her visit to Paris, but an unexpected escort in the person of William might shake her plans and make her hesitate. She didn't know at the time that Count Rohan would stand in her way or help her. They arrive in Paris. Madame Contra invites William and Cécile to her abode, and while they are in her house, they can have fun and fool around with peace of mind. Cecile tells Elizabeth to be careful with such words as she may be misunderstood to be alluding to William standing nearby. Elizabeth laughingly tells Count Rohan that she was only joking. He replies that he will just pretend he didn't hear it. Cecile stands at the window and thinks that while she is in Paris, she can't think what her husband, Duke Marmontel, is up to, and she needs to check it out immediately. The demon Azrael appears behind the Duchess's back and hugs her tightly, reproaching her for not telling him that Count Rohan will also be coming here, and therefore his heart is broken. Cecile sarcastically replies to Azrael that this is very funny and pushes the demon away, asking him to let her go, and tells him that whether William is here or not has nothing to do with what they came to Paris for, and hopes Azrael isn't jealous of Count Rohan. The demon asks Cecile if she would believe him if he said he was jealous of her. The Duchess crosses her arms across her chest and asks Azrael not to pretend to be human. The man replies to her that even demons can feel jealousy, but he's used to it, of course. Cecile tells the demon that he will have to give the king the letter anyway, but that Arno must not find out anything. Azrael asks Cecile what she is going to do now. The Duchess tells him that the first thing to do is to hand over this letter. Cecile's first goal was to impress the Parisian public, whether they favored her or not. But even though her family was on the verge of a split, people openly gawked at her wherever she went. It's rare to meet a truly high-ranking aristocrat. Cecile believes that everything will be as she wants it to be. The next day, the Duchess tours Madame Contra's mansion. When she arrives at the library, Cecile marvels at how large it is and asks Elizabeth why she has kept silent all this time about having one in the house. Satisfied that the Duchess likes her library, Madame Contra tells her that she has even new items in her collection that have recently appeared in bookstores and asks Cecile to let her know if she wants to read them. He also offers her to admire the stars through a telescope. Cecile thanks Elizabeth for such an interesting tour. Madame Contra tells Cecile to rest properly while she steps back to see if tea and snacks are ready for their modest feast. Meanwhile, Cecile strolls through the library and finds one interesting red book that stands out from the rest and reaches out to get it, wondering if she should read it. She tries with all her might to reach the book, but she fails miserably. Count Rohan approaches her from behind and, holding Cecile by the elbow, pulls a book from the top shelf. The Duchess thanks William for his help and asks him if he likes Paris. The Count replies to Cecile that it is not bad, but that he likes Venice better. The girl sits on the stairs and tells William that she has never traveled outside of France, so she doesn't know much about the outside world, and it would be great if she could travel freely. But she must get her husband's consent to this, and she is unlikely to give it to her. In this case, William proposes that Cecile divorce and marry him. He suggests that the Duchess run away together, as there are many places he would like to go with her. Cecile asks William if he can do it. The Count confirms it, and the Duchess thinks that he has not changed at all. As she descends the traveling stairs, she asks Count Rohan if he really has not the slightest doubt and calls him Charles. William's eyes rounded with surprise, he asks the Duchess about what she just said, since he clearly heard her called by name from a past life. Cecile realizes that she has just made a terrible, irreparable mistake. William grabs Cecile by the shoulders and asks her if she really has any memories of their past life. The girl tries to ask Count Rohan what he means, but he doesn't let her speak and pulls her to him and kisses her on the lips. Cecile tries to push him away, but she can't do it either, as William wants to merge with her again in a long kiss. He asks Cecile how long she has been remembering her past life. As she leaves, she tells the Count that it doesn't matter. William tearfully pulls Cecile into his arms and tells her that he is grateful that she has returned to him and that he has been able to see her again after a long time. The Duchess also begins to shed tears at his words. Watching what is happening downstairs, Madame Contra can't understand how such things happened and can't believe that William has memories from his past life, and she doesn't understand it at all. Not wanting to interrupt their conversation, Elizabeth leaves the library, slamming the door behind her. In the living room, the demon Azrael sits and tells Madame Contra that it seems inevitable. Demon realized this, since it's not the first time he's been through this one, but for some reason, it's unbearably hard for him now. So this time, it's going to be different. Elizabeth replies to Azriel that she has no doubts and believes that Cecile will find her way to him, for he is the only one who can save her from eternal suffering. Demon crossed his arms on his chest and smiling noticed that Madame Contra turns out to be able to comfort, and he is very touched by it. Showing the demon her respect, Elizabeth bowing tells him that it is because she is on his side. Azriel asks her if this side includes his colleague Mephisto. Madame Contra answers him that she is not sure. Cecile and William continue to talk about past lives sitting on the stairs in the library. The Duchess asks the man how much he remembers. The Earl of Rohan tells her that he remembers everything that happened up to the moment of his death and asks Cecile how her life was after he was executed. She tells William that after his death she committed suicide with a small bottle of poison late at night. Count Rohan asks Cecile why she did it. The Duchess corrects him by saying that it was Leia who did not do it. But on second thought, the voice she heard telling her that she couldn't just give up since the king was still alive, she wondered who that person was. William notices that Cecile draws a line with his old self. The Duchess tells Count Rohan that his feelings for her are those of his past life and asks him if he has thought of anyone else. William tells her that whatever the reason, his feelings for her are genuine, and the fact that they met again like this, she considers it a blessing from God. The Count, after these words, presses Cecile into his arms. The girl replies that it would be God's blessing to bring the Duke north. He asks the Duchess if she means revenge and if it's worth it, since you can just walk away from him in this life and just focus on their relationship. Cecile suspends the Count. It is not clear to her why William would say this to her, as he does not think she would feel the same way about him as he does about her. At night, the Duchess can't sleep and sits on the sofa thinking about something of her own. As is customary, Azriel appears behind Cecile and asks her what she is thinking about. The girl asks the demon about when he came here. Azriel answers her that he came here just now and tells her the news that the Duke of Marmontel has arrived in Paris and suggests that there will be a meeting today. Cecile asks the demon if there is any way to get in. The demon tells her that there is and that she can have a lot of fun with him. The Duchess is surprised that Azriel is also going to this meeting with her. They arrive at the place where the Duke of Marmontel has come. Cecile, dressed in men's clothes, asks the demon if they really won't notice them. Azriel asks her if she believes him. The girl, hiding behind the demon's back, replies that she believes him, but because of this action, the man concludes that she does not. The people in this room are discussing the fact that today, the king has levied a huge tax on them to fill the bellies of himself and the pig-like aristocrats chasing him. They believe that these dogs should be isolated from the rest of the world because they turn their backs on the suffering of the rest of the people. And call not to leave this country to them, as they are the main culprits who are destroying the country, and the real masters of this country are they. Cecile asks the demon who these people are. Azriel explains to her that they are liberals, representatives of the Enlightenment and representatives of the church, Republicans, and so on, and it's a kind of treason. The Duchess notices her husband Arnaud at the end of the table and wonders why he is here at this hour. Azriel explains to Cecile that the Duke of Marmontel is their head. The girl can't believe it because he is also a nobleman. The demon holds Cecile close to him and tells her that what she is seeing is true. At that moment, one of the men gets up from the table and tells everyone that it is time to get out of here and get rid of the aristocracy. Cecile back home still can't believe it was such a meeting, but if she tells the king, she may be killed immediately. Azriel asks the Duchess what she is going to do in such a case. The girl replies that she should wait a bit and observe the situation. Afterwards, she thanks the demon for his help. Azriel asks Cecile what it's like to meet her previous husband again. The Duchess clarifies how he knows about it and their kiss. Demon answers her that he is not that free and has a lot of work to do and just felt that way, since everything she feels, he feels too. As Azriel moves through Cecile's hair, she talks about how she doesn't know what to do with William now, but she doesn't think he wants revenge on the Duke. The demon asks the Duchess not to worry about it, as he feels the same way she does. Cecile turns to Azriel and asks him if he happens to be a mind reader. He says that he knows that the Earl of Rohan is standing outside the door and then vaporizes, leaving behind a lot of black feathers after William knocked on the door and asked if she was in the room. Count Rohan slams the door behind him and walks into Cecile's chamber. The girl puts on a robe covering her nightdress and asks William if he is going to go to bed since it is late. Count Rohan walks up to Cecile and hugs her, telling her that she is not the reason he can't sleep. She feels a pleasant warmth coming from his body. William asks Cecile to let him help her. Putting the Duchess's hand to his beating heart, he reminds her that she told him she wants revenge on the Duke of Marmontel and tells her that he wants to help her do it and she can use him however she wants. Cecile suggests that it's probably him using her, not her. At this time, Mephisto was walking through the palace hall covered with red banners. When he notices him, William, sitting on a rung of the balcony, tells his colleague that everything has turned out just as he wanted. Mephisto answers him by pointing out that he's being discussed amongst the other demons, and that's dangerous. That's why he's doing it. Azrael smirks and asks his colleague to just tell him about it, about the god's mistake they've discovered, or rather, what he's discovered. In one of her past lives, she saw the first demon Azrael and noticed that he had a very interesting hair color. The demon asks her if she can really see him, as the others cannot. Putting her hand to her chin, the girl continues to scrutinize the demon's appearance with interest and explains to him that she speaks this way because she really sees him. Mephisto is curious to know why things happened the way they did. The demon Azrael tells him that those who deviate from the God-created scenario are considered a mistake by God. They hate God. When we find these mistakes, they're nothing but God's weakness, so it's strange to him how Mephisto can't be happy. And coming down from the rung suggests that's why he's so obsessed with it. Just as he's obsessed with Cecile, Mephisto is obsessed with God's mistake that he discovered. But now things are different. So Azrael is curious and asks Mephisto to tell him how he managed to escape the god. The demon asks Azrael if he's asking because he wants to escape from Cecile. Azrael reminds Mephisto that he first asked him the question. The colleague answers him that he didn't get rid of it completely, and instead he made a god like himself, as it can only be avoided when he is no longer human, and finishing the story asks Azrael if he can do that with Cecile. The next morning, the Duke of Marmontel arrives at Madame Court's mansion. Elizabeth, meets Arnaud in the lobby of her house and asks him what he is doing here. He replies to Court that he has come to Paris to see his wife Cecile. Elizabeth tells him that she is sorry, but the Duchess is not yet determined to meet him, and she was at the ball until late at night and so had little sleep. At this time, Cecile is sleeping in the same bed together with Count Rohan. When she wakes up, she will William so dinner time has already passed, and doesn't he have to get up? When the Count opens his eyes, he asks Cecile if she is busy today. She tells him that she is visiting Mrs. Gwyneth's salon this evening and is going to see the opera afterwards. Cecile lies on top of William with her arm around his shoulder. He asks her to cancel all plans for the day and stay with him, and asks if she wants to stay with him. The Duchess agrees to stay on the condition that the Earl of Rohan eats something and lies back in his arms. William throws his body over Cecile's and apologizes, saying that in his condition he simply cannot do it. A short while later, Cecile and Madame Contra are in the living room at the table. Cecile asks Elizabeth how their meeting with Arnaud went. At this point, Cecile begins to cough. Madame Contra asks Cecile if she is well and tells her that she thought she was dead because she had not left her room for a long time. The Duchess asks Elizabeth to stop talking like that and reminds her that she told her that she has something for her. Remembering this, Madame Contra tells Cecile that she should have a look at the letter that was sent to her and puts it on the table. Opening the letter, the Duchess tells Elizabeth that it came from the rabbit. Madame Contra asks Cecile what has happened at His Majesty's. The Duchess replies that she should go to Versailles immediately. Before the party, Cecile, Madame Contra, and Count Rohan were having a masquerade party at the mansion. Elizabeth, paying attention to the Duchess, tells her that she saw a familiar face in the crowd. That person turns out to be Lady Joffrin. Cecile flies in asking what she's doing here. Madame Contra explains to the Duchess that this is a party where anyone can come, including call girls. But if Joffrin decides to offend her, she'll have him thrown out immediately. Cecile asks Elizabeth not to worry about it as she assumes she was definitely sent here by Arnaud, and asks her to keep an eye on her all evening and offers to show her what she wants to see here. And then he calls Count Rohan to him and demonstratively embraces him, bringing him close to his ear. And looking at Joffrin thinks that whatever Arnaud does, she is not going to give up just like that. The morning after the ball, the couple sits on the edge of the bed. Cecile ties a black ribbon taken from the demon Azrael's hair around her leg. William notices this and asks his lover how long she has been wearing the ribbon. Cecile replies that she just likes it, and when asked if she likes the color black, she says she does and remembers Azrael. And come to think of it, he hadn't reappeared since he vanished into thin air. That day she asked the demon if he was jealous, but he denied it. William runs his hand down Cecile's leg. The girl asks him what he is doing. William puts the Duchess on the bed and pulls off her stockings and replies that they still have time for a meal and he cannot do anything for her if she is not around. At that moment, they are interrupted by a knock at the door. Cecile is told that her mother has arrived in Paris at Mrs. Contra's mansion. The Duchess goes down to the guest room and sees her mother sitting on the sofa with a rounded belly, and her lover André has arrived at the mansion next to her. Cecile, standing next to Count Rohan, asks her mother why she came here. Madame Mercier asks her daughter why she won't return to her husband, the Duke of Marmontel. The girl asks why he says that. Madame Mercier tells her that she has heard rumors that she is obsessed with a young British man and has even had an affair with him. Cecile confirms that all these rumors about her are true. Her mother is outraged that they have come all the way to Paris to tell everyone. André tells his stepdaughter that her mother does not deserve to talk to her about it. Cecile doesn't say anything and turns around and leaves the room. Ander reassures Madame Mercier that he will speak to her daughter and, apologizing to the Marquis Grey Rohan, leaves the room. Madame Mercier snickered that her daughter had just left without saying anything, ignoring Count Rohan, that the Duke of Marmontel was a terrible man and she would not stop talking about it. André runs after Cecile and asks the Duchess to wait at least a minute. The girl, not wanting to talk to him, tells him to take her mother home immediately. He shouts after her that he did not decide to come here with her mother, but was forced to do so by the Duke of Marmontel to convince her to return to him. André begs Cecile to listen to him because the Duke has threatened not only him but Madame Mercier, but she is only here because she is worried. The surveillance and intimidation are all familiar to her. Arnaud hasn't changed a bit from his previous life. Cecile asks André not to worry as this is entirely her problem and asks him to leave the solution to her. And then asks André to take care of her mother. Her mother's lover asks the Duchess not to worry about it. Cecile can't do anything about it. She has no choice but to make a style of difficult decision. A girl sits by the window wondering if Azrael will come to her and how long he is going to ignore her. She starts to yawn at him, shouting his name loudly, but he doesn't answer her. When she surrenders, she says that she had planned to take revenge on Duke Marmontel from the beginning, and so she can do quite well without his help. A short time later, Cecile and Count Rohan are strolling arm in arm through the grounds of the mansion. William tells Cecile that the pastry shop recommended to them by Madame Contra is around here and asks her if she wants to go there. The Duchess does not hear him as she is immersed in her own thoughts. After a short time, she answers the Count and asks him what he has just told her. He again asks Cecile if she wants to eat something sweet. Agreeing, they picked up a bunch of different desserts and drinking tea with them, sitting on the flower-lined veranda. Cecile is still deep in thought about something. When he notices that his beloved is not paying attention to the conversation and seems to be in the astral, he decides to distract her by pulling her cheek. Covering her face with her hand, Cecile asks William why he did it. The Count wonders what she is thinking about. He tells her that if she is worried about something at the moment, she can tell him and he will support her. Cecile tells him that nothing is wrong and that he shouldn't worry about her. While admiring the Duchess, Count Rohan reflects on how happy he is that he has finally met her, his love, but he has the feeling that she is gradually drifting away from him. Cecile is with him now, but it's as if she's somewhere else. Meanwhile, all the demons are wearing identical masks that hide half their faces, like the one Mephisto wore in the beginning. Azrael walks past the other demons whispering behind him. Mephisto sees his colleague, greets him, and notices that he hasn't attended a meeting for a long time and asks Azrael if he has forgotten where to go. The blonde-haired demon doesn't answer anything. Before the meeting begins, Mephisto sits down next to Azrael, but Azrael rudely asks him to move to another seat, preferably farther away. But Mephisto silently continues to sit in his chair. Staring at the yellow light weighing down the air, the demon Azrael reflects on the fact that he always wanted Cecile to fail and thought he would be glad to find her wrong, but ironically, after finding her, became very attached to her. At that moment, Azrael's thoughts are interrupted by the voice of a god coming from a bright yellow ball and tells the demon that in his power he will be forever, and neither from him nor from Cecile he will never be able to escape, and showing the sleeping Duchess asks him what he is going to do in that case. When Azrael hears this, he covers his mouth with his hand in horror. Mephisto, sitting next to him, asks his colleague what happened. Azrael can't believe that Cecile's death is only a short time away. The next day, Cecile smashes a plate on the floor with a loud clang. At the sound, a maid comes and, frightened for her mistress, asks her if she is all right and is going to clean it up. As it is dangerous, she asks Cecile to stay away from the shards. The Duchess hides the handkerchief-wrapped shard behind her back and waits for the maid to leave before unwrapping it, thinking that she didn't mean to resort to this, but Azrael reacted the strongest when she was in danger. Cecile can't help it, nor does she need to find out the truth about why he disappeared. With words that everything will be fine, Cecile brings the shard from the plate to her hand to cut it, but Azrael does not let the Duchess do it and shouts to her to stop. At that moment, the shard evaporates from the girl's hand. Cecile then tells Azrael that they haven't seen him in a long time, and asks him what he's been doing all this time that he's only just shown up now. Without answering her question, the demon asks Cecile if she's decided to do it, just so he'll show up again. The girl tells the demon that he's always been the way he is now. She rushes to meet her destiny, takes everything on her shoulders as expected of him, and presses herself against his chest and tells him that she knows that the voice she heard when she died in her past life was him no other way. Cecile asks Azrael since when he has been watching her. The demon puts his hands on the girl's shoulders and asks for permission to say something to her. He promises to talk to her someday about this long story. And throwing himself at Cecile's feet, without letting her palm out of his hands, he asks her not to do it again, because he won't disappear without her permission. Looking up at her, he asks her to take care of herself and the baby, and congratulates her on her pregnancy. Cecile can't believe it. A short time later, the Duchess arrives at the Mercier estate where she lived before her marriage. As she passes the guests, she hears a judgmental whisper behind her back. Cecile approaches His Majesty. The king is pleased that the Duchess has finally arrived. Out in the garden, he asks Cecile if she has finally decided on his request to follow the Duke of Marmontel. The Duchess replies to the man that she has one condition. The king asks Cecile to tell him of this request, as she is taking on a difficult job, and perhaps he can help her with whatever she asks. The Duchess asks the king if he has heard rumors about her. His Majesty tells her that he has heard about it, since everyone is interested in the Duchess. Cecile tells the king that she will be honest with him, and asks him to recognize him as the successor to the Marmontel family of the child she is carrying. The king wants to answer her, but she interrupts him to say that she and Arnaud cannot have children. The king tells the Duchess that in that case she will have to give up the power over the Marmontel family to another. Cecile replies that she doesn't want to do that because she's already been through it once. His Majesty asks the girl if Arnaud will stand in the way if he does her such a favor. The Duchess explains to him that Arnaud will be banished anyway because he is old and will therefore end his life in exile in Siberia. The king asks the Duchess if she has enough information to do so. Cecile confirms this and adds that if her child becomes the Marmontel successor, His Highness will not have to worry about anything, as it is not a true bloodline that threatens His Majesty. This sounds tempting to the king, and so he agrees to accept the terms. After a while, Cecile decides to visit her mother. Madame Mercier asks if they had a good meeting with the king. The Duchess confirms this and tells her that they had a good conversation. Suddenly, Andre enters the conversation and, holding his newborn daughter in his arms, asks Tsile to look at Louise. She is sleeping sweetly in his arms, wearing a white and pink bonnet. The Duchess approaches her little sister and marvels at how cute and small she is. Her mother's lover asks Cecile if his daughter is not adorable and exclaims that he wants to eat the little girl. Madame Mercier asks Andre to stop saying stupid things and give the child to a nanny. Cecile, watching this, calls Andre a complete fool. The girl is thinking about something and stares at one point without averting her gaze. Her mother asks her why she looks so depressed and what happened to her. During the day, Cecile tells Wilhelm that she is pregnant. The Count asks her if she is sure, and hugging her says that she can't believe she is going to be a father. He kisses her on the top of her head and thanks her for it. William wonders who they will have, a daughter or a son, and assumes that if they have one that looks like her. Cecile replies that she would like them to have a son because he could be the head of the family. The Earl of Rohan offers her to go to England with him, as the Duke will not accept the child anyway. Scylla replies that she is not abandoning the Marmontel family by taking everything from it, and this child will be the successor of the family. William, resentful of Cecile, turns away from her. The Duchess asks him not to misunderstand her, but the Duke will disappear anyway and they can be together. Count Rohan tells Cecile that he hopes she will not involve their child in her revenge against the Duke of Marmontel. The girl wants to say something to William, but he interrupts her, reproaching her that the more she clings to revenge, the more she cannot let go of the Duke and her grudge against him. He is now very far away from home, but even at this moment his shadow is still with Cecile. The Duchess, looking down at the floor, reminds William that she told him she was going to take revenge, and he, in turn, promised to help her in this endeavor. Count Rohan replies to Cecile that he will certainly help her to the very end, but even in this happy moment, he cannot get rid of the thought that he is standing in their way. He leaves the room. Mrs. Mercy interrupts her daughter's musings. Cecile replies to her mother that she is fine. At that moment, someone starts knocking on the door. The woman lets him in. Count Rohan enters the room. The Duchess asks him what he is doing here. William tells her that he is here to take her away. After a while, Cecile and William get into a carriage and set off. The girl explains to the Count that he should not have come all this way to pick her up. William tells Cecile that he missed her so much that he couldn't do anything about it. The girl doesn't understand how he can just talk about it and asks him if he is angry with her because she has decided everything for both of them. Count Rohan tells her that she is right, but he wanted to see her too much and asks Cecile to kiss her, and at that moment they merge in a passionate kiss. She puts her head on William's shoulder and tells him that she has not changed her mind. The Count replies that he has not changed his mind either, so he will try to change her mind and thinks it will be quite easy for him, but he cannot leave Cecile or his child. The Duchess ponders what would have happened if they had met earlier. If it weren't for their memories of their past lives where they loved each other, they wouldn't have this heartache and could live happily respecting each other. But should she push him away now? Cecile arrives in Paris to see Madame Contra. The next day, Elizabeth tells the Duchess that they are in trouble because they have a guest arriving. Cecile asks the Countess why she calls it a problem. Lord Billinker enters the room and tells Cecile that it has been some time since they last met at their wedding to the Duke of Marmontel. The Duchess asks Lord Billinker what brings him here. The man replies that he is here to give her a letter from the Duke and to fetch the Earl of Rohan. William wants to contradict him, but his uncle angrily tells him that he will not tolerate any more scandals, especially since the Duke of Marmontel has generously agreed to forgive him, so he must return to England. The Earl of Rohan replies to Lord Billinker that this is not going to happen. Albert tells his brother that his mother is in critical condition and that he must be with her now. Late at night, Cecile sits with the demon Azrael on a fountain in the middle of the garden. The demon asks the girl what her heart tells her. Cecile answers him that she must follow Count Rohan. Azrael tells her to do what she wants and to do it now. Cecile tells him that she wants to be with William, but first she has to get rid of Arnaud, and then it is not too late to return to Count Rohan, and thinks that he should be with his mother now, so she doesn't want him to worry about her at a time like this. Azrael notices that she is thinking only of revenge against the Duke of Marmontel and asks him to do it. Cecile rudely asks the demon what it all means, since if she doesn't destroy the Duke herself, it will all be pointless. She asks him if she has to go that far. Azrael gets up from the fountain and walks forward. Cecile asks him what is wrong with him and notices that he has changed a lot. The demon does not turn to the girl and tells her that he is still the same and nothing has changed. Cecile doesn't believe him because he can't look her in the eye as if something is eating him up. She assumes he knows something, and if it concerns her, she must find out now. The demon tells her that even if she knows, nothing will change. The next day, Count Rohan approaches Cecile and asks her what she is thinking. Without waiting for an answer, he asks her not to worry as he has decided to stay with her. The girl asks William not to do this as it is not necessary, and especially since his mother is very ill and it is better for him to be near her at the moment. Hugging him, she tells him that they are not saying goodbye forever and asks him to go away and not to worry about her because she feels safe. She lied to him because before she comes back, she may not be in this world anymore, and she thinks it's the right decision to let him go now. It's not too late, and William should get on with his life. Cecile asks for a name for the baby while it's still here, but she doesn't know yet who the daughter or son will be, so she asks for 2 names instead of 1. William tells her that if there is a daughter, they will name her Leah, and if there is a son, I will name him Charles. Cecile is silent. The Count assumes she doesn't like it. She tells him she likes it very much. If she tried to break up with him, William would definitely not accept it. So Cecile lied to him on purpose and brought him safely back to the country. But she herself has returned to hell, to the Duke of Marmontel's mansion, and must now be there for the last time. Cecile meets her husband after a long time. He tells her that she is unlikely, as he did not think she could humiliate him so much. Arnaud asks Cecile if she has told his brother King Louis. The Duchess laughs out loud and tells her husband that if she did not, then who will? The Duke asks his wife if she realizes what she has done, as several people have been caught because of her, and business is delayed. Cecile asks him if he really intended to achieve what they call freedom and equality. In her eyes, he is using all these people to overthrow the king. She only sees him trying to get back on the throne, and asks if he thinks it's the same as King Louis and him. The Duke of Marmontel asks Cecile to watch what she says, as the tone is very restrained at the moment. The girl reproaches him for taking the time to sit at the table and talk. Perhaps it would be better to give bread to hungry people, and even better if he respected women and asks him to keep his pants on. Arnaud swings at his wife to hit her. But then falls to the floor when he sees the long black wings behind Cecile's back. Behind her appears a demon in a black cloak, decorated with roses, with a long scythe in his hand, and a white mask with a gilded cross painted on it, and a golden crown on his head. The Duke sees this and calls his wife a witch. Cecile tells him that she knows about it and he should have divorced her earlier. The Duchess recalls their dialogue with the demon Azrael. She tells him that she doesn't understand why she has so little time left, why the sinful Arnaud lives so long, and why she must die and thinks it is unfair. Cecile wonders who she exists for, and if she dies like this, what will happen to her child. She snuggles into the demon's arms and tells him that if her next life is going to be like this one, she'd rather just disappear forever. Azrael asks Cecile not to say so because waiting for her to be born for thousands of years is the only hope in his life. He asks the girl not to make him give up even that. The demon wraps his palms around Cecile's face and makes her promise that he will always be there for her, do whatever she wants. Azrael pleads with the Duchess not to think of such things again. The scythe lands close to Arnaud's body and then vaporizes, leaving behind black feathers. Cecile tells him that she will not do it, because even if he goes into exile, he will be treated differently because he is a member of the royal family. She leaves the room saying goodbye to Duke Marmontel, thinking she won't let him ruin her life. The next day, as planned, Duke Marmontel goes into exile in Siberia. He takes one last look at his home and gets into the carriage. There is an uproar in the street. No one can believe what is happening, and the whole of Paris is on its feet. Madame Contra tells the Duchess that because the funding has stopped, the angry gentlemen are venting their anger in the news bulletins, all but telling Madame Cecile. Elizabeth asks the Duchess how long she will tolerate this ridiculous gossip. Cecile replies that they will stop if you give them money. Madame Contra warns the Duchess that she may be caught cheating. Cecile says she's given it a lot of thought. It seems to her it is an irresistible trend of time, and at least she wants to make sure that her child does not drown going against the current. Madame Contra crosses her arms across her chest and asks Cecile what she will do if the king reveals her before. The Duchess asks Elizabeth not to worry, as she is sure he will not understand. In the evening, Cecile is sitting in the greenhouse reading a letter. The demon Azrael reappears next to her and asks her if the letter is from William. Covering her face with the sheet, Cecile notices that he now never leaves her side and never lets her be alone for a minute. She asks the demon if he is familiar with the concept of privacy. It's funny to Azrael that Cecile can't think of anything else while he's hanging around her. The girl asks him if he can erase her from William's mind. The demon asks her why she'd go that far. She tells him that in a previous life she had experienced this feeling of being left alone, and so she doesn't want to put William through this. Azrael tells Cecile that he could, but he won't, since Count Rohan is capable of dealing with this fate himself, and asks her to stop this grim conversation. And for the sake of her and the child, he advises Cecile to think only of good things. The girl asks the demon to tell her about the first time she met him.